Chapter 488. No. There is no common ground. The only agreement I want is a death match. Gustav remained unflinching as he voiced out. The inspectors were once again taken aback for a few moments. Great Commander Cheyenne has asked us to relay to you that you can request for whatever you want so long as you cancel the request. Inspector Derby added. As tempting as that is, my answer still remains no, Gustav said once again. The three inspectors were speechless at his hard-headedness on this matter. Seeing his stance, they believed they wouldn't be able to do anything to convince him otherwise, so they decided they would relay this message to Great Commander Cheyenne. The inspectors released Gustav after a few minutes of mentioning some necessary things for his mission. Gustav headed back to his room after all was said and done. He wasn't backing down on the death battle. So long as Endrik accepted it, the match would hold as planned. Within his room, Endrik held onto a small white box that he just got delivered to him a while back. He had a slightly curious look on his face as he opened it to check the contents of the box. Within the box was a small round black device. The instant Endrik tapped on the button, he noticed a holographic message was projected from the device along with the voice of an AI who read out the contents of the message. Gustav Crimson has issued a death match recipient, Endrik Oslov venue, Hall of Doom date, August 17th. Do you wish to accept? Yes/no. Endrik stared at the piece of information in front of him with a conflicted expression after the AI finished voicing them out. He wants us to battle to the death. Endrik opened his mouth but couldn't express his words. Instructions unclear. Do you wish to accept this match? Yes/no. The AI voiced out again. Endrik's hands moved in a fidgety manner as he tried saying something but still couldn't find the words. Recalling young Joss' commands was messing with his head, so he couldn't think straight. Instructions unclear. Do you wish to? Before the AI could complete its sentence, Endrik tapped the power button, switching it off. Huff. 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 He started breathing in and out profusely as he dropped the device back in the box and closed it up. He took it to a corner of his room and dropped it there. What do I do? Endrik wondered with a confused expression as he moved towards his bed area. Gustav arrived back in his room later and went back to channeling his bloodline. It had been a very hectic day. His energy was almost completely depleted. Although he still had energy from many other bloodlines, making use of skills and abilities from the system always took a lot of energy points, especially when he made use of the combination to use more than one ability at a time. At this time, the whole MBO camp was in an uproar about the events that took place today. The first years began to compare Gustav to the seniors, and rumors even started flying around of how Gustav was on their strength level. Even after a few days passed, the hype of the challenging event that took place still hadn't died down. In the last few days, Gustav had been approached by several senior cadets with nefarious intentions. Some of them didn't like the fact that Gustav's strength was being compared to theirs. They found it insulting that a first year that had only been here for about 6 months would be compared to those who have been here for about 2 years. Since bullying wasn't allowed in the MBO, and it was literally impossible for the seniors to find a loophole in bullying Gustav since he was an officer, they decided to challenge him to duels instead. Gustav had received several duel challenges but kept turning them down. He wasn't interested in fighting any one of these seniors. At least, not now. With the ruckus he caused by exposing so many abilities the other day, he wanted things to die down, so he had decided he wasn't accepting any battles with seniors till he was back from his first mission. No one knew how long that was going to take since missions sometimes extended longer than initial estimations due to unforeseen circumstances. Gustav could only focus on continuous training for now. A few more days went by, and Gustav noticed that he hadn't gotten feedback on the death match he issued for himself and Endrik. He decided to visit the challenge hall on this day. Arriving there, he met the officers at the counter and inquired about the death match he issued. One of the officers on the counter proceeded to check on the information regarding the death match just as requested. According to our data here, there has been no response from the recipient of the issued challenge, the officer stated while checking the holographic monitor in front of him and clacking on the keyboard to confirm. What? No response from Hendrik? Gustav questioned with a slightly confused expression. Yes. The recipient has either accepted nor declined the request, the officer at the counter responded. Gustav was speechless for a bit. After standing there for a few moments, he made his way out of the challenge hall. This had him confused, and he kept wondering why Hendrik hadn't responded to the challenge yet. A lot of thoughts came to his mind as he headed back to his room. Upon arriving at the residence, Gustav headed straight for Hendrik's room. He already knew the number beforehand, which happened to be located at the end of the corridor. Gustav arrived in front of Hendrik's room door in a minute and proceeded to knock. He wanted to make sure Hendrik had received the challenge request because he saw no sense in not responding to it. Gustav felt it would have made more sense if he had declined rather than not making any decision he saw as suspicious, especially after the inspectors requested for him to cancel it the other day. Calm. 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 After knocking for several minutes, there was still no answer. Gustav allowed his perception phase through the wall and scope around the inside of the room. Oh, it's empty, Gustav muttered as he stopped knocking and turned around to leave. Hendrik happened not to be within the room at this time. Within the space simulation training room, Hendrik stood in front of Officer Mag with a conflicted expression as a dialogue ensued between them. So what exactly do you want to do? Officer Mag asked. I don't know. Hendrik stammered as he answered. Hey kid, look at me. Officer Mag called out to him. Hendrik did as she had said. Do you want to battle your big brother to the death? Officer Mag stared into his eyes and asked. Tell me the truth. Do you still hold so much grudge against him that you feel can only be settled by the death of one of you two? She asked once again. I don't. Not anymore, Hendrik answered. There's your answer. Decline the request and talk to Gustav, Officer Mag answered. But this is what he wants. He wants to kill me with his own hands, Hendrik voiced out. And it's all my fault, he added. I didn't say it wasn't. That's why I said you should go and talk to him, Officer Mag persuaded. Hendrik sighed as his face straightened up with a look of determination. I will. Thank you, Hendrik voiced out before turning around to leave. I don't care about your order, Hangzhou. I don't care that you want to fight me to the death, big brother. I will not accept this, he decided internally. Hendrik walked back to his apartment with newfound zeal and decided he would speak to Gustav tomorrow after their morning routine since it was late already. The next morning arrived, and as usual, the cadets went out for their morning routine. The instant the morning routine ended, Hendrik decided to look for Gustav, but before he could, he noticed Gustav headed in his direction. Gustav arrived in front of Hendrik amidst the crowd of many other cadets. Why haven't you accepted it? Gustav asked with a powerful tone. Hendrik immediately understood what he was referring to. Can we go somewhere to talk? Hendrik asked politely. I have nothing to say to you. Accept the request and let our fists do the talking on the set day, Gustav voiced out with an aloof tone before turning around to leave. No. Hendrik suddenly voiced out, causing Gustav to pause his footsteps. At this point, the cadets who were initially leaving after the morning routine stopped to see the ongoing drama. Gustav slowly turned around while asking, What did you say? I said no. I will not accept the death battle request, Hendrik voiced out with a strong tone. Chapter 489. Gustav's forehead creased as his eyes dimmed while staring at Hendrik with a suspicious look. What do you mean by you will not accept? Gustav voiced out with a cold tone. Exactly what I mean. I do not accept to having this death match with you, Hendrik responded. The cadets in the vicinity all had shocked looks on their faces at this point in time. Hearing that Gustav had issued a death match with Hendrik caused a commotion amongst them. Death matches were hardly issued the MBO, and this was the first time they heard of one since they arrived here. Not only was it among first years, but it was also between brothers. Is this a joke? Gustav asked with a cold tone. No. I do not wish to battle to the death with you. No, I do not wish to battle with you at all, Endrik responded while walking forward to stand in front of Gustav. What are you playing at now? This another ploy of yours? Gustav asked while raising one eyebrow up while staring down at Endrik. No, I just want us to stop this pointless enmity and grudge. Please, can we go somewhere to talk? Endrik requested politely again. Gustav paused for a bit, and kept staring at Endrik with a look of scrutiny. After a few seconds of intense gazing from both parties, Gustav leaned towards Endrik's left ear. You don't fool me, he slowly whispered into Endrik's ear. I know you're a part of that group because I made sure every single one of them were caught except for you. As these words drifted into Endrik's ear, his eyes widened. He knows? If you don't want to be exposed, you'll do well and accept the death match, Gustav added before raising his head back and turning around to leave with a smirk on his face. The cadets witnessing the dialogue between them had looks of curiosity, as they noticed the expression on Endrik's face after Gustav turned around to leave. What did he say to him? This question was dominant in most of their minds. Endrik stood in place for a long time with a conflicted look on his face before leaving. He recalled along the way that Officer Mag was the one who was responsible for the case about the group of cadets secretly under young Joe. He couldn't imagine how she'd feel if she found out he was amongst the group. This left Endrik with a bad taste in his mouth. On the bright side, he was glad that even with all the investigations, the officers had not been able to figure anything out with the cadets, which meant nothing could lead back to him right now. He was supposed to be their leader because, according to young Joe, they were the disposable pawns that he had inputted to help Endrik rise in the future. Endrik was so shocked that Gustav was the one behind them getting caught. At the moment, young Joe had asked Endrik to lay low with any suspicious activity due to the officers catching on, which meant it would be dangerous for him if he was found to be a part of the group. The troubled Endrik walked back to his room with an expression of contemplation and conflict high on. This was puzzling for him, and he knew Gustav wouldn't listen to a word he wanted to say, so he had no idea the steps to take at this point. He arrived back in his room and moved towards the box by the side. Picking up the device, he tapped on the button. Do you wish to accept this challenge? Yes/no. The voice of the AI rang out again. Endrik froze in place again, not knowing the decision to make. What did you say to him? He asked Gustav with a curious expression as they sat in his living room. Some encouraging words to help him in making a decision faster, Gustav responded with an unbothered expression. That's quite vague, Ildris voiced out from the side. Well, it's Gustav. Of course he won't give a clear answer. Falco shook his head as he voiced out. I don't know. Something kinda feels off with the kid. I ain't trying to dispute you two enmity or anything. But did you notice he doesn't get in trouble lately? He said with a contemplative expression. It's just an act. He's always up to no good, but it'll end him once and for all this time. Gustav responded with an emotionless tone. The place turned silent for a bit as no one wanted to really say something perceived as wrong by Gustav since this was a sensitive topic. I haven't experienced what you have gone through, either can I say I totally understand how it felt, but that kid is still your brother. I can't imagine killing my own brother, Timmy voiced out from the side. Brother? What big insinuation, Gustav said with a scoff. He's still your blood though. It seems kind of. Before Timmy could complete his sentence, Gustav cut him short. Stop spouting crap, Timmy. Just like you have said you don't understand because you never experienced it. Leave it as it is. Nothing you say is going to change my decision, Gustav stated with an unflinching look like always. Let's all calm down now. He butted in to reduce the tension. I think what Timmy is trying to say is, just think about the whole situation from every angle before standing on your decision. It's alright if you decide not to change your mind. Just be 100% sure about it and think the aftermaths. He explained. Sure, Gustav replied half-assedly, causing everyone to go quiet again. The next morning arrived quickly, and presently, it was around 4 in the morning. Bed creaking sounds could be heard within Angie's room as she moved from side to side across the bed with a sweat-soaked face. She suddenly opened her eyes and sprang up with a scared look. Chapter 490. Huff! 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 Her chest heaved up and down heavily as she breathed in and out. Another nightmare. Gustav. As these thoughts floated into her head, she suddenly felt immense pain in her thighs. HNGH! Angie groaned in pain as she pulled the blanket to the side to look at her thighs. The outline of black veins could be seen on both her thighs. She kept seething in pain for the next few seconds as the lines grew longer like tree roots from her thighs to her knee area. Suddenly the pain stopped, and the black veins suddenly disappeared. This. Again? Angie muttered with a look of confusion and relief mixed together. The last time this happened, she threw it off as nothing, thinking it was a one-time thing, and now it was happening again. This time it even felt more painful than before. Angie decided that she would visit the medical checkup center today to make sure she was okay. She felt it might be a reaction to maybe something she ate, but she wasn't too bothered because she was sure she would be okay the moment the medical practitioners figured out what the issue was. Putting this aside, she found out that she was still worried about her nightmare. I feel like something is off. I need to speak to Gustav again. I can't shake off this weird feeling. Angie muttered underneath her breath as she stood to her feet. She couldn't stop thinking about her most recent nightmare, which was similar to her last nightmare as well. She went on an early morning jog to clear her head. Angie's current speed was so fast that she ran around the entire camp 1,100 times in less than 2 hours. Currently, across the camp, she was labeled as one of the most difficult special class cadets to defeat because even though she was weaker than most physically, she could only be beaten if an attack made contact. Her speed couldn't be followed, so hitting her was close to impossible, if not impossible, for most cadets. Only cadets with high perceptive abilities similar to Gustav's would react to her speed and maybe time their attacks in correlation with it. However, it would still be very difficult to hit her. After her morning jog, she joined the cadets for the morning routine as well as Gustav and the rest. Gustav minded his business as usual as he ran forward through the first forest. At this point, he was no longer dilly-dallying behind since he practically knew how to figure out places with traps before he arrived there. It was now way easier than in the beginning. Cadets would occasionally try to meet up with him and share conversations since this was the only way most of them could meet him. Normal cadets were not allowed to visit the dragon residence. Gustav wouldn't even give anyone the chance to come close to him on normal days. However, Gustav would still ignore all of them and continue running forward. He had received too many love letters this period, especially from girls saying they wanted him to have S*X with him. Gustav once again sighed as he dodged another crazy cadet. What can a guy do to avoid all this unwanted attention? Another one wants sex, Gustav complained internally. Maybe you should just give in. You might need the experience. The system chuckled as it butted in. No, I certainly do not, Gustav retorted with a tone of annoyance internally. Oh. You don't want them to know of your inexperience? Little Gustav is afraid of showing his disability to perform procreation activities properly. I see. The system voiced out internally with a burst of laughter. You little. Gustav's forehead creased as he was about to curse. Gustav. He suddenly heard someone call out to him from the side. He would have thought it was another weird cadet coming to ask for S*X again if he didn't recognize the voice to be Angie's. Angie. Gustav voiced out as he turned to the side. Can I see you later? After the morning routine, Angie asked with a serious expression. Why? Gustav asked while raising one eyebrow. You should say yes, this might finally be your chance to get disvirgined. The system suddenly butted in within his mind. Shut the fuck. Before Gustav could complete his sentence internally, Angie responded. I need to talk to you about something important. Please, she pleaded. Gustav stared at her for a few seconds before responding. All right. Just as he said this, they arrived in front of the tall mountain and began climbing. It'll race you back to the field. Angie suddenly voiced out with a delighted look as she climbed up fast. You and I both know you'll lose. Gustav voiced out as he also climbed up. Oh, is that so? We shall see. Angie suddenly increased her climbing speed, going ahead of Gustav. This is pretty pointless, but... Okay, challenge accepted. Gustav responded before also starting to climb upwards with speed. At first, he wasn't taking it very seriously and didn't climb up with his full speed, but he noticed that Angie was getting faster and faster. Gustav started taking it seriously and climbed fast as well. Whenever he closed the gap between them and started climbing faster than Angie, the moment he noticed her, she would increase her speed again. This was surprising to Gustav because he knew Angie didn't have this kind of stamina with their sealed bloodlines. Angie was also surprised with herself. She didn't understand why, but she was filled with so much adrenaline at the moment. Her determination to perform better than Gustav today was at its highest. About an hour later, Gustav stood at the starting point with a look of gratification. Angie was currently lying on the ground, breathing in and out profusely. I told you it was pointless. But good job, you did pretty well. Gustav commended with a smile. Chapter 491. It was pointless. I'd have won. Angie was out of breath, and her sentence kept breaking due to that. Elevra arrived before you did as well, Gustav said while gesturing at Elevra, who was standing a few feet away. Don't be too hard on her, Gustav. Elevra voiced out from behind. Ugh! Angie groaned with a defeated expression as she sat up, while pouting her lips. At this point, other cadets began to arrive as well. Gustav and Angie wanted to move to a secluded location to go discuss, but Gustav remembered what had happened with Vera the other time and decided to change his mind. A male cadet wasn't allowed to visit a female residence unless the female cadet gave him a permission slip and vice versa. However, even with that, the other party couldn't stay for too long, but Gustav was sure they would have enough time to discuss since he wasn't interested in having Angie stay at his place for too long anyway. Gustav brought Angie over to his place, and they both sat in the living room while exchanging gazes. Angie was feeling extremely nervous at the moment. It wasn't the first time she was staying in a room with Gustav alone, but she couldn't handle his eyes staring straight into hers without breaking contact. What did you want to talk about? Gustav finally asked after getting tired of seeing Angie silent. Angie was brought out of her reverie, and a tinge of red appeared on her face as she turned to the side. Gustav, I have been having some nightmares lately. Angie voiced out with a low tone. If you're having nightmares, take sleeping pills, they'll help keep your mental state calm, Gustav advised while raising one eyebrow. He wondered if this was what was so important. As a daughter of two scientists, Gustav was sure Angie should know what to do about nightmares better than a lot of people. It's not a normal nightmare, Angie muttered. What do you mean? Gustav asked while squinting his eyes. You are always present in my nightmares. Well, not just you. You and Endrik, Angie explained. And what has that got to do with anything? Gustav questioned. In my nightmares, you two battle and Endrik ends up killing you, Angie revealed. There was silence between them for a few seconds as Angie stared at Gustav with a worried expression. It's just a dream, get over it, Gustav stated with an unbothered expression. No, I don't think so. I have this feeling, this very bad feeling nagging inside of me. Like something terrible is going to happen if you have that death match with Endrik, Angie explained. Stop being delusional, Angie. He can't win against me. It's going to be his fall, the moment he steps into the Hall of Doom with me, Gustav said with a confident tone. Gustav, I don't know how to explain this to you. I never have nightmares. I've only had a nightmare once before I knew about your death match, and that was when I was still a kid. And something similar to what I had a nightmare about manifested itself in reality, Angie said with a scared tone. Please cancel the death match, Angie pleaded. Gustav stared at her once again for a few seconds before replying. I can't do that. No, I actually can, but I want, This step is essential. If you hadn't stopped me from killing him the last time, we wouldn't be having this conversation, Gustav added. But I. Angie was short of words. She didn't know how to respond to that, and realized that her decision on that day actually led to the current predicament. There's nothing to worry about anyways. Stop being delusional, Gustav stated while leaning against his sofa. Angie knew Gustav well enough to understand that at this point, nothing could change his mind. Even if the most influential person on Earth or someone with a lot of prestige came to request for the battle to be cancelled, Gustav would still ignore this person. She could only hope now that things went well, but then an idea came to her head. If the other party doesn't accept, no death match will hold. From the rumors, Hendrik isn't on board and even argued with Gustav the other day about accepting. I just need to talk to Hendrik and make sure he doesn't accept. These were Angie's thoughts as she stood to her feet. Alright, I'll see you later, Angie said as she moved towards the entrance along with Gustav. You probably won't, Gustav responded as he walked her to the door. Angie arrived outside the door, and just as she took one step forward, she paused. Gustav was about to close his door, but he paused when he noticed she stopped walking forward. Angie suddenly turned around with speed and hugged Gustav before planting a kiss on his left cheek. It was so fast that Gustav couldn't react in time. Before he knew it, she had already turned back around and dashed out of the corridor with immense speed. Swoosh. Stay safe. These words drifted into his ears along with the whooshing sound due to Angie's speed. Gustav slowly raised his right hand and placed it on the left side of his cheek, rubbing it subconsciously. That was quite sneaky of her, he muttered before turning around to move back into his apartment. Later that evening, Gustav and Vera also met up in his room. Have you managed to complete the process? Gustav asked her. Yes. My parasitic strains are fully developed now. I can take control of him whenever you want me to, Vera responded. Good, Gustav said with a satisfied look. You are going to battle to the death with him. But everyone knows you're powerful than him, so Vera does not understand why he needs to be controlled, Vera stated with a confused tone. Initially, I wanted to control and use him, but now I feel it would be better if he was disposed of. The reason I asked you to continue working the parasitic strain is to make sure the match is accepted. Now that he can be controlled, I want you to activate the strain and make him accept the death match, Gustav instructed. Chapter 492. Oh. Vera now had a look of understanding on her face. Right now, the news about the death match between Gustav and Hendrik had spread all across the camp, as well as Hendrik's stance on rejecting the request. Many cadets felt this might have to do with the fact that Gustav was currently the most powerful first-year cadet, and going against him was literally begging for defeat. Seeing as it was a death match, they felt Hendrik was scared of battling with him. A lot of them had noticed Hendrik's shift in personality recently, and even attributed it to this, thinking Hendrik was only pretending to be a good boy now till when the storm passed. All right, Vera nodded as she responded to Gustav's demand and closed her eyes. Time passed, and Gustav could see Vera's eyelid twitching occasionally. After a few more seconds, she opened it, and a confused expression could be seen written all over her face. I am getting an interference from an unknown and hidden force within him, Vera stated. This force is clashing with my strains. It's almost like it has. Vera had a look of confusion and disbelief on her face as she paused her sentence. Like it has what? Gustav's eyes squinted as he questioned. Like it has the same function with my parasitic strains. It's fighting for supremacy over control of Hendrik, Vera responded. Just as I thought. Gustav did not seem to have a confused expression on his face. Vera's response to him was not shocking because he already knew that something was within Hendrik. Same function EY? This revelation had Gustav thinking. It was certainly within him since the first day he arrived, but I can say for sure that it wasn't operational. The system voiced out in Gustav's mind. It wasn't operational means he has been himself all this time, but he only started changing about 3 months back. There's a chance that this has to do with that change. Now that there is interference from Vera, he should currently be himself. I will need to observe him for now to see how he acts, Gustav said internally. What are you talking about? A man in a large underground laboratory dressed in a blue business suit voiced. The man in front of him wore a lab coat and had a one-lens spectacle on his right eye. The nanites seem to have met with some kind of resistance. I apologize, Sir Young, but we don't know the reason for this, the man voiced out as he kept tapping on the holographic keyboard in front of him with a frustrated look. Why are you all so incompetent? You had better make sure the nanites are functioning properly again. Endrick must accept the challenge, young Joe voiced out with a tone full of killing intent. The man in the lab coat subconsciously shivered as he answered. Yes, sir. I and the team will do our best to make sure the nanites function as intended. Young Joe scoffed and turned around to leave along with the 2 large men in all black bodysuits standing beside him initially. Bunch of useless, he voiced out as he moved away. The other scientists within the laboratory had fear-stricken faces as they started working on making sure the nanites within Endrick's body functioned properly. A few hours back, Hung Joe had received a report from one of the officers within camp about how Endrick openly refused to accept Gustav's deathmatch challenge. This report threw Hung Joe off because this was totally the opposite of what he had expected. He started wondering what was wrong with Endrick. Even though he got the report about how Gustav was currently the strongest first-year cadet a week ago, he still had ways to make Endrick win. He would have thought Endrick was afraid of battling Gustav, but then he remembered he had sent a message to Endrick telling him he would be provided with whatever equipment he needed to win, even though the piece of equipment was too powerful to be used against the first year. Young Joe couldn't understand why Endrick would decide to refuse when he knew he had a strong backing such as his. This was something he wouldn't be able to figure out since he didn't get feedback from the text messages he sent Endrick. According to the terms of the deal, he couldn't control Endrick by using the nanites unless he refused to obey his instructions after his training within the MBO. However, young Joe kept getting a bad feeling about Gustav and was concerned about the speed of his growth and the threat he could pose if he was allowed to continue growing, so young Joe decided to breach the contract. He didn't really care about that anyway. He instructed his scientists to control Endrick and make him accept the death battle with Gustav. The scene that had just played out a few minutes ago was due to the scientists mentioning an issue concerning the nanites not functioning properly within Endrick. They tried doing as young Joe had instructed, but they were also met with an interference just like Vera. This was because both parties were interfering with themselves, causing Endrick to currently be free. Every action he was making right now was of his own free will due to the 2 foreign elements within his body being unable to battle the other to supremacy. The next day arrived in a flash, and on this day, Officer Mag decided to pay Gustav a visit. To what do I owe this unexpected breach of privacy? Gustav voiced out as Officer Mag made herself comfortable in his living room. Breach of privacy? I knocked. Officer Mag responded with a scoff. Yeah, you did, and then opened the door with your senior officer's pass right after. Gustav's eyebrows raised up slightly as he voiced out. You didn't respond. Who knows, you could have been drowning or dying in one way or the other inside here. I made the necessary call to prevent accidents. Officer Mag folded her arms as she spoke with a righteous tone. Chapter 493. You're so shameless. You remind me of her. Gustav shook his head as he moved forward to sit down as well. Officer Mag exclaimed. Why are you here? Gustav asked with a straight face. Officer Mag sat up at this point and gazed at Gustav for a few before speaking. I heard about the death match, she stated. So? Gustav asked with a tone of confusion. So did you speak to your bro? I mean Endrick first? Officer Mag asked. Why should I? We have nothing to say to each other. Gustav responded. He does have something to say to you. Don't tell me you didn't notice that he's somewhat different from before, Officer Mag said with a mysterious tone. Psi not you too. As an instructor, I am disappointed you didn't notice that it was all just an act. Gustav voiced out while rolling his eyes. What? An act? Haha. Officer Mag started laughing out loud after hearing Gustav's statement. I've tortured, broken, and trained that kid every day for the past 3 months. I've spent so much time with him that I can guarantee that I know him better than you do, even though you both lived in the same house for several years, Officer Mag stated. It is not an act. That kid is truly trying his best to be a better person than he used to, she added. Yeah, right. Of course you have no idea about anything. Don't worry, you'll find out in due time, Gustav voiced out cryptically. Listen to me, kid. I ain't no fool, don't discredit me like that. Give your brother a chance, just let him speak to you once, Officer Mag voiced out with a strong tone before standing up and turning around to leave. When she got to the door, she paused for a bit. I'm not disputing the fact that you went through a lot of pain and he was a factor. He played a part in that, but do not forget that he is 12 and half his childhood and upbringing was under your crazy birth mother. Kids have no idea of how to act properly without the right guidance. Remember this, Officer Mag stated before leaving through the door. Gustav sat in place for a few minutes with an expression of contemplation. I guess we shall see, Gustav muttered with a mysterious tone. There were still 3 weeks left till he went for his next mission, so Gustav decided to spend the next week observing Endrik. Day by day, he would either spy on Endrik by activating life signs so he could check his activities through his point of view, or he would stalk him. Gustav still had several skills in his arsenal that he could use to disguise himself, so it was practically impossible for him to be exposed. Gustav noticed that during all his spying, Endrik mostly kept himself in isolation doing self-training in his free time while sometimes he would go visit Officer Mag. Even though his punishment had ended, Officer Mag would still train him occasionally. There were times he noticed Endrik just staring into space. Gustav could tell that the kid was thinking, which surprised him a bit. Other times Endrik would be laughed at by groups of cadets who saw him as a wimp for backing out of the challenge with Gustav. They would make sure their conversations were loud enough to hear as they ridiculed and laughed at him. Originally, Endrik would be pissed at such actions. However, this time he totally ignored such voices in the background and continued his journey. The entire week went by, and Gustav was not able to find any issue to foul Endrik with. As another day by, Gustav finally decided that he would have that talk with Endrik the next day. By nightfall, Endrik arrived in his room, and just as he took his seat, he heard a knock at the door. He walked towards it and opened it up, only to find a box sitting on the floor in front of his entrance. He picked it up, already knowing who it was coming from. Endrik placed it on the table in the middle of the living room and opened it up. Inside was a small holographic message device. Endrik activated it, and a pre-recorded message was projected in front of him. Hello, Endrik. Young Jo's face and half of his body was being displayed as he talked. I'm sure you must have received several of my previous messages, which means you know what I have instructed you to do but still refuse to do so. That's because I don't have to, you bastard, Endrik said internally. I know that right now you're probably saying something along the lines of, you don't have to obey me now since your training within the MBO hasn't ended, blah blah. Ha! Endrik's face froze as he heard that. I don't even know how you did it. I'm still wondering how you were able to interfere with the functionality of the nanites. Huh? Interfere with the functionality of the nanites? Endrik had a confused expression on his face as he heard that. It was a good trick, but did you really think I'd let you disobey me? As young Jo got to this point, the footage suddenly changed. Endrik's eyes widened as he saw the next footage. Mom! Dad! Endrik shouted out as he spotted the two figures hanging from a rope. Liam and Becky Oslov were tied to each other, hanging upside down within a dimly lit and enclosed space. There were several men in masks seen standing around them with weapons in their grasps. Both parents had blood-soaked faces, and blood was currently dripping down from them and falling to the floor as they were suspended in an upside-down position. The footage glitched and returned back to showing just young Jo. I don't know if this is enough encouragement for you, but I'll add a few more to it. Young Joe started speaking again. Chapter 494. These men, after beating up both your parents half dead, will also rape your mother 37 times each. After taking those turns, they will gut them both and watch them bleed out. Oh, and mind you, all these will be recorded and sent to you. I hope you enjoy watching gory movies. After saying this, young Joe disappeared as the holographic footage turned dark. At this point, Hendrik was seething with so much rage that the room walls began to vibrate. The objects in the room all started floating upwards along with his bed. Young Joe! It'll kill you! Hendrik voiced out with a voice full of killing intent as his eyes turned completely blue. As Hendrik started to get consumed by rage, the footage suddenly came back up. Of course, all these can be prevented if you accept Gustav's death challenge. If you're scared of losing, I will provide you with the best cheat mechanism which will ensure you kill Gustav once and for all. After saying this, the footage displayed his parents again from every angle before disappearing. This time the holographic message had ended for real. Hendrik's mind was in a state of confusion at the moment. He remembered Officer Mag's words about how his parents were mostly the cause of his bad personality and Gustav's pain. He had come to this realization already. But they are still my parents. I can't let them suffer this fate. The next day arrived, and as usual, the cadets went for their morning routine. Only 2 weeks remained before Gustav left for his first mission at this point. Which meant he only had this week and a few days from the next before his death match with Hendrik would either be cancelled or held. At this point, even though it was still being gossiped about, everyone already pushed it aside because they knew without Hendrik's acceptance, the battle couldn't hold. Gustav had decided that he would have a discussion with Hendrik after today's morning routine. He was still finding it hard to believe that Hendrik was changing, but he wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt due to what he had seen the past week. After the morning routine ended, Gustav walked over to Hendrik as planned. Let's talk, Gustav demanded while turning around with the intention to head to somewhere private. There's no need. We have nothing to say to each other. Hendrik suddenly voiced out from behind. Gustav's face showed confusion as he turned around. What do you mean? You said you have something to say to me, and giving you the chance to do that now. He added with a strong tone. Not anymore, I don't. Hendrik responded with a strong tone as well. Both of them stared at each other with intensity. At this point, everyone around was focusing on them both once again. Gustav was wondering what Hendrik was playing at as he scrutinized him with a suspicious gaze. I have accepted your challenge. We will have our death battle next week as intended, Hendrik stated before turning to the side and walking away. Are you sure? Gustav asked, causing him to pause his footsteps. Isn't this what you wanted? Don't tell me you're chickening out now, Gustav? A sadistic grin appeared on Hendrik's face as he turned to the side and spoke. Looks like you finally decided to drop the act. I guess it was too tiring for a little kid to keep up a facade. Gustav smirked while turning around. You can count on getting destroyed next week, Hendrik voiced out before resuming walking. Gustav totally ignored his last statement and started walking towards his room. Almost fell for it. At least now I won't feel any form of uncertainty when tearing you to pieces with my own hands, Gustav said internally as he moved towards his room. No one noticed the slight look of pain on Hendrik's face as he walked away. The entire issue got blown up again, causing an uproar all across camp. The cadets were all talking about how the number of special class cadets would go down by 1 in a week from now. Most of them wondered what Hendrik was smoking for him to challenge Gustav, who was currently number 1 and was being compared to seniors. Angie, who had witnessed what happened, had a look of confusion on her face. She had a chat with Hendrik last week, and Hendrik told her he had no intentions of accepting the death match challenge. This had made her calm down, but now Hendrik was admitting to accepting it and seemed to have so much animosity towards Gustav once again. She decided to go after Hendrik to confront him about the decision, but there was literally no way out now that both parties had accepted the challenge. Gustav later got feedback about the challenge from the challenge hall, which confirmed that Endrik had truly accepted. Their death match would be held a week from now. Gustav was not even bothered in the slightest about how the match was going to turn out. He couldn't see any way through which Endrik could defeat him. Don't be too cocky. You know that kid definitely wouldn't just accept the challenge without having anything up his sleeves. No one just walks to their own death, you better be careful. The system voiced out when Gustav was channeling his bloodline. Sure I will. But no matter what he has up his sleeves, I will end him this time for good, Gustav responded internally with a cold look. After channeling his bloodline for 2 hours, he decided to check his 5 years quest progress. Quests: locate Dimension 6 and Planet Humbad, duration, 5 years, time elapsed, 7 months, progress, 0.12/100%, become the most powerful mixed blood on Earth, duration, 5 years, time elapsed, 7 months, progress, 9 to 100%. He was sorely focusing on his progress on becoming the most powerful mixed blood on Earth right now. Almost 10% for the past 3 weeks. Just how powerful is that dude? Gustav felt like progress had been really sluggish recently due to this. Chapter 495. Almost 10% for the past 3 weeks? Just how powerful is that dude? Gustav felt like progress had been really sluggish recently due to this. Even though he could still feel the improvement of his strength with every training, achieving 10% had been an impossible task for the last 3 weeks. He closed the system interface and continued on with his training. Days went by, and the tension created by Gustav's and Endrik's incoming battle still hadn't reduced. Instead, the hype increased daily. After hearing about it, Officer Mag had tried speaking to Endrik several times, but he didn't give her a chance. Same as Angie, the both of them could feel like there was something wrong somewhere. Instructors and officers sent by the higher-ups to try and prevent the battle between the two ended up failing as well. The MBO was not willing to lose any of these two because they both had the highest potential among all other first-year cadets. They could more or less already predict the outcome of the battle since Gustav was currently number 1. Endrik was only 12 years old, yet he was among the most powerful special class cadets. By the time he had achieved the same age as the current first years, they could only guess how powerful he would be then. This would only happen if he lived long enough, but right now, it wasn't looking that way. They couldn't really do anything about it since Gustav and Endrik had refused to listen to reason. The only way out now is if both of them passed out in the middle of, and the chances of that situation playing out is less than 10%. During the week, Gustav received a package from the outside world. The officer that brought it to his door had a respectful gaze and bowed slightly when passing it along to him. Gustav slowly opened the box and found a stack of paper prints within. However, there was a letter above the stack of paper prints. The instant Gustav spotted the name on the letter, a broad smile appeared on his face. Miss Amy. Finally, Gustav muttered underneath his breath with a joyful look. He first took the letter out of the box and moved towards one of the sofas to take a seat. Hey kid, I want to ask how you're doing because I already heard of the ruckus you've caused in camp. Good one, make sure you deal with nuisances mercilessly. I compiled a report from several outer planetary officers about the planet Humbad in the Trixton galaxy. The delay was due to the situation with the T-67 device. A lot of crazy stuff has happened in the last 6 months, but I won't mention them in this letter. I'm still on the investigation, but there has been a lot of revelations. Red Shadow is working with me for now. You can meet up with him when you're out of camp for your first mission. I rigged your mission, so expect to see me soon. If you have an important message to pass along to me, use the device in the box. Amy. Gustav read the entire message with a smile on his face. The T-67 device. Looks like they're still on that case, and she rigged my first mission. Does this mean I might get sent to deal with the case she's working on? But didn't the inspectors say my first mission is going to be low-ranked? Gustav was still confused about that particular sentence. There was no way the MBO would send a first-year cadet on a mission with pros that were practically dealing with a very difficult mission. Since he couldn't wrap his head around it, Gustav decided not to overthink for now. He stood back up and moved towards the box to take out the stacks of paper prints. There were at least 300 papers stacked upon each other in 2 places. Gustav brought them both out and stared at the bottom of the box, which was almost empty. A small square-shaped blue device could be seen at the corner of the bottom. This was the same device Miss Amy was referring to that Gustav could use in sending a message to her. Gustav could immediately tell that this device was powerful enough to send a message that would be transmitted outside of camp. He turned around to move back to the seating area in a bid to ignore the device. But he suddenly stopped as a thought appeared in his mind. Gustav turned around again and reached out to grab the device from the box. He immediately tapped the activation button afterward and started speaking. Miss Amy. 1 week later, just like that, a week went by, and the day for Gustav's and Endrik's death match finally arrived. Their battle had been scheduled to hold at 12 p.m., so there would still be normal training activities. The entire camp was in an uproar because this was a battle they couldn't miss. However, the Hall of Doom was a place that couldn't accommodate everyone, so only those who arrived early would be able to witness the battle on a closer scale. The training sessions went by in a flash like time was moving 2 times quicker today. Gustav was accompanied by Eldris, and the rest when it was close to 12 p.m. He just opened a vortex up for them, and they instantly arrived in front of the Hall of Doom. The Hall of Doom was located in a secluded part of the Mbio camp where only snowy lands could be seen. It was an ice-cold region with lots of snowy mountains and white trees. The Hall of Doom just happened to be located at the top of a massive glacier. It looked like a tower with the way it extended upwards. Many cadets were trooping towards the location, and some had already arrived inside. The entrance was currently crowded, but the instant Gustav was spotted, the crowd made way for him. Chapter 496. He's here. Oh my goodness, he looks as dreamy as ever. See those eyes. I can't believe he will be brutally murdering his little brother today. All kinds of discussion could be heard from the background as Gustav walked in. Gustav arrived inside the hall and instantly felt warmth envelope his being. Although the outside of the hall was extremely cold, there was a massive ring of fire within. The inside of the hall looked similar to a rocky cave. The walls and the ground were all ashy in color and rough in a rocky way. There were pathways on the side that formed a kind of circle. The circular pathways that extended around the internal structure of the hall were not very big and had ledges. In the middle was a massive pit of fire and lava that kept combusting. FHMMM. Occasionally pillars of fire would burst out from the pit in the middle. It was up to 100 feet deep, and everyone could see the hot red sea of fire from their positions. In the middle of the river of flames was a battle platform floating on top of it. Everyone would have to watch from the circular pathways that surrounded the pit of fire, and since the pathways weren't very big, not too many people could fit in here. This was where the heat was coming from. It was quite amazing that there was a river of fire within a pit in this cold region. No one understood how the Hall of Doom was constructed. The battle platform in the middle covered a radius of over 5,000 feet, but the river of fire surrounding it was way larger. Gustav arrived at one of the ledges and stared at the platform floating from place to place across the hot flamey river. Everyone around kept focusing on him. The flaming lava river was extremely hot, and would burn anything or anyone caught within in a matter of seconds. The platform was also floating, so the battle was looking more dangerous than ever. However, Gustav already knew this. He leaped from his standing position towards the platform beneath. Swoof! His body traveled downwards across the river of flames before landing directly on the floating platform. Thwaish! Part of the liquid flames jumped up due to the impact, but the floating platform only moved to the side a bit. Gustav controlled his landing properly so it wouldn't really cause any effect. He stood in place, waiting for Endrik to show up. It was almost 12 p.m. at this point. Several instructors could be seen in the vicinity. They had to be here to spectate as expected. The instant it was 12 noon, Endrik arrived within the hall. I thought he wasn't going to show up. Dash. This kid really signed his death warrant. Dash. Who knows, he might put up a good fight. Dash. Remember, he still has an unknown bloodline grade. He might be S rank and the terrain is also to his advantage. Endrick also disregarded the discussions in the background like Gustav and leaped downwards the moment he arrived at one of the ledges. Fwa. His body traveled towards the battle platform, and when he arrived above it, his body slowly descended as he activated his telekinesis. Endrick smoothly landed on the platform and stared forward at Gustav, who was more than 200 feet away from his position. Both parties have consented to this battle. There are no restrictions. No form of punishment shall be meted out for usage of styles, weapons, or gadgetry. One of the instructors voiced out from above. The battle ends when one of the two parties has lost their lives or if both parties pass out. The entire vicinity became quiet at this point, as that was mentioned. Angie stood in the midst of Glade and Matilda with a worried expression on her face. She could only hope that things would turn out well. E and the others also watched from their position, but they didn't look worried in any way. Officer Mag was also present here, but she had a look of helplessness on her face because, at this point, there was no way to help the situation. Gustav and Endrick stared at each other intensely as they prepared to start the battle. Begin! The instant the go-ahead was given, Endrick stretched out both of his hands while activating his bloodline. Free eye! Chunks of flaming lava wrapped in the power of will were suddenly pulled out of the river of flames surrounding them. Gustav dashed forward at this point as Endrick raised his hand up and flung them down, sending these massive balls of flames hurling towards Gustav's approaching figure. Fly! 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 The temperature surrounding Gustav, which was already very hot, turned even more scorching hot as these balls of flames flew towards him. Sway! Swee-eye! Swee-eye! Gustav first paused his movement, and quickly swerved to the side to dodge the first one. Boom! It made a loud sound of collision as it hit the platform, causing liquid flames to blast across the place. At this point, Gustav was busy dodging the next ones. He jumped to the side and spun in the air as he dodged two flame projectiles heading towards him from separate directions. Jumping in the air, Gustav dodged 3 more and closed in the distance between himself and Endrick by another 100 feet. However, the instant he landed, Endrick seemed to have already predicted his landing spot and sent out a compressed wave of will towards him. Why hierarchy? Several rocks on the platform blasted apart as this wave crashed forward with immense force, arriving in front of Gustav in an instant. Gustav raised his right hand and placed it in front of him since he was unable to dodge it at point blank. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as Gustav was pushed back with his clothes ripping from his body while cracked lines appeared underneath his feet due to getting shifted backward forcefully. Gustav suddenly smirked as he raised one leg up and forcefully stomped it downwards. The instant this action was made, the compressed waves came to a stop. Gustav raised one of his legs and pushed it in front of the other, forcefully pushing the wave backward, which caused Endrick's eyes to widen slightly in surprise. Chapter 497. Gustav raised one of his legs and pushed it in front of the other, forcefully pushing the wave backward, which caused Endrick's eyes to widen slightly in surprise. Gustav began cutting through the waves with sheer force and arched back his left hand before throwing it forward intensely. Bang! His fist made him cut through the waves of will completely, and he dashed forward while activating dash afterward. Endrick gnashed his teeth and swung his hands diagonally, causing more compressed fiery balls to be sent flying towards Gustav again. Sway! Sway! Swee-eye! Gustav once again dodged all incoming projectiles, leaping towards the side and upwards to make sure none of them made contact with him. Even while dodging them, due to the immense heat, he could still feel his skin getting cooked. 3 were flying towards him from the sides and up front at the same time. Endrick had timed them so perfectly that dodging was nearly impossible. Phew! The first one arrived in front of him. Gustav leaned backward, causing his back to be only a few inches away from making contact with the battle platform. While the first one was flying over his body due to how low he descended, the other two were already close to hitting him from the side. Gravitational displacement has been activated. Both compressed liquid fire projectiles headed towards him from the sides suddenly slowed down. He spun his body sideways and slapped his hand on the ground, causing his body to ascend upwards. Why? He completely spun several times in the air as he flew over the flaming projectile on the left and landed a few hundred feet in front. Sprint has been activated, swoosh. Gustav instantly closed the gap between Endrik and himself before sending a palm strike towards him as he arrived in front of him. Endrik quickly conjured a wall of will in front of himself to use as a shield. Bang! A loud sound of collision reverberated across the entire place as Gustav's palm made contact with the telekinetic wall, which managed to stop his attack from hitting Endrik. However, even with the wall placed in front of him, Endrik was still blasted backward along with the wall, causing him to slide back by over 100 feet. It didn't get destroyed due to the strength of Endrik's will, but the force of Gustav's palm strike still caused him to be blasted backward along with it. Gustav didn't stop there. He dashed forward once again, throwing out his palm repeatedly. Palm strike has been activated. Palm strike has been activated. Palm strike has been activated. Palm strike multiplied the force of Gustav's palm collision by 6 times, which was why it was so powerful that with every hit, an intense wind would be blasted across the surroundings from the point of impact. Endrik gritted his teeth as he noticed the cracks on his telekinetic wall, and raised his hand. Gustav suddenly felt a powerful force descending upon him from above and leaped backward. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as the platform vibrated intensely. It swayed from place to place, causing hot liquid fire to be blasted forth from the river around them. The outline of a massive palm appeared where Gustav's initial location had been. It turned out that Endrik had conjured a massive invisible palm and sent it crashing down on Gustav. Gustav, after dodging by jumping back, dashed forward once again with speed. This time Endrik's eyes emitted a deep blue glow as he squeezed his right hand together, forming a fist, before throwing it forward. Fwah! The ground started being blasted apart in a straight line as a massive invisible fist, shaped with Endrik's will, traveled forward. Gustav could sense that it was at least the size of a small plane. Endrik arched his arm backward with full force and threw his fist forward. Bang! Small and big forces collided, but unlike what one would expect, Gustav wasn't blasted backward. Instead, Endrik's will collapsed like a fragile piece. Endrik's eyes widened once again, seeing as Gustav was overpowering his will like it was nothing. Gustav once again dashed forward and arrived in front of Endrik like before. Endrik shifted backward and stretched out his hand to wrap his will around Gustav. Not this time, kid, Gustav said internally as he began increasing in size. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav increasing in size made it harder for Endrik to wrap his will around him and also took a long time. Gustav's fist arrived in front of Endrik at this moment, striking him square in the chest. Bang! Endrik's chest caved in as the force of Gustav's punch sent him spiraling across the air. Gustav jumped upwards, traveling towards his spiraling body in midair, and somersaulted forward several times before landing on Endrik's chest. Endrik's spiraling body paused in midair as Gustav's landing on his chest caused him to descend with speed. Bang! Another loud collision rang out as Gustav completely pinned Endrik to the platform while standing on his chest with both legs. They were only a few feet from the ledge of the platform at the moment. Hi-ya! Endrik suddenly screamed out, causing a wave of destructive telekinetic force to blast forth from his being. Gustav made an X sign with his arms as the force knocked him off Endrik, throwing him backward by a few hundred feet. Endrik used that opportunity to quickly jump to his feet and clean the blood oozing from his nose. He was hardly injured due to the protective layer of telekinetic armor he wore all across his body. Maintaining this armor took up energy, but it had protected him from the full force of Gustav's punches, so he knew it was useful. He screamed out again as he stomped his feet on the ground, sending another set of destructive telekinesis waves forward. Gustav, at this time, was already prepared for it, so he leaped over 500 feet towards the side, dodging the wave. Maybe it's time to get a little more serious, Gustav said internally as he began to transform. Chapter 498. Gustav's body morphed as his muscles expanded, and he grew taller, with his skin tone turning red. Red fur grew out of his skin as well, with big fangs. He dashed forward diagonally towards Endrik's position in the midst of his transformation. Endrik, who had noticed his approach, stretched apart both hands and clasped them together with force. Gustav, who was dashing forward, halted his movement and stretched out both hands as he noticed two powerful invisible forces headed towards him from both sides. It was like two massive walls closing in on him, looking to crush him in between. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as Gustav stopped both invisible forces with his palms and started running forward once again while holding them in place. Endrik once again sent out another telekinetic attack towards Gustav, which he successfully destroyed. Suddenly, Gustav arrived in front of Endrik with his fist swinging in motion. Endrik tried moving towards the side to dodge Gustav's attack, but it was too fast for him. Bang! Gustav's large fist slammed into Endrik's side, sending him flying into the air once again. Fwah! Endrik felt his ribs crack as his body flew hundreds of feet backward across the air. Swoon! Everyone's eyes widened as they noticed Endrik's body fly over the ledge of the battle platform and towards the red river of fire surrounding it. His body still kept flying for several hundred feet before it started plummeting towards the burning sea of flames. Dash. That was quite fast. Dash. I didn't expect the battle to be this quick. Dash. Gustav didn't even get serious yet there are a lot of transformations he hasn't used. Dash. I guess this is the end. The spectating cadets voiced out in the background as they watched Endrik's body plummet towards the river of flames. Endrik suddenly opened his eyes just as he was 10 feet away from making contact with the sea. Truinen. His eyes glowed up again as he spun in the air and stretched out his hand towards the surface of the river of flames. Thulum! Everyone's eyes widened as Endrik's body paused 2 feet away from making contact with the flames. His body could be seen suspended in midair. Endrik had made use of his telekinesis to create a floating board of will which he used to suspend himself above the river of flames. He stood to his feet and stared at Gustav from his position atop the sea of flames. Gustav slowly walked towards the ledge and stared back at Endrik, who was about 500 feet away, floating above the invisible board. Endrik's eyes squinted as he stretched out his hands towards the river of flames once again. Grarhai! A weird sound reverberated across the place as everyone noticed a massive circle begin to form on the surface of the river of flames. The circle outline turned deeper and deeper and continued to spread out, causing more liquid flames to flow into it, till it covered a span of over 1,000 feet. Endrik started raising his hands. Hiya! He groaned out as he lifted his hands. Grarhai! The massive circle formed underneath started ascending along with the river of flames within it. It was as if a bowl was dipped in to scoop out flames. But in this case, the bowl was made of telekinetic energy, and was so massive that the number of liquid flames being scooped up was bigger than the size of a building. Everyone's mouth widened as they watched the river of flames being scooped up into the air by Endrik's powerful will. Dash. Just how powerful is his will for him to do that? Endrik kept groaning while raising his hand, causing the massive telekinetic bowl of liquid flames to keep rising till it was hovering above, in front of the battle platform. Everyone could feel the intense heat of the bowl of flames from their position since it was currently floating about 50 feet above the river. The massive hole created after Endrik pulled that out was slowly being filled up. Endrik gave Gustav an intent-filled glare as he swung his hand downwards with force. Why? The massive bowl of flames began to descend with speed towards the platform. It would have cast a massive shadow, but it was flaming hot and burning red, so instead, the heat surrounding the platform increased as it descended. Gustav turned around and dashed away to avoid the wrath of the river of flames descending upon the platform. Swoosh! Bang! He managed to outrun it and get out of its range of collision before it slammed onto the platform. Intense heatwaves spread across the vicinity along with shock ripples causing the entire platform to vibrate intensely. Gustav paused and turned around as he noticed the destructive ripple headed for him. Atomic manipulation has been activated. A 3-foot-long milky-colored blade was conjured in his hand, which he swung forward with full force. Sui-hai! He completely cleaved the ripple in half, but the heatwaves turned his skin flaming hot. Heat resistance has been activated. Gustav instantly activated heat resistance, causing the temperature of the surroundings to reduce for himself. Krryyhh. As his red skin returned to normal, he noticed the cracks that were spreading across the platform. Endrick's attack had weakened the platform significantly, and it looked as if it would split apart any minute. Gustav hadn't even gotten time to stabilize himself from the previous attack when he noticed numerous balls of liquid flames floating in midair. Zoom! 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 Thousands and thousands of them appeared in midair surrounding Gustav and Endrick. Endrick still had his arms raised slightly as he stared in Gustav's direction from up ahead. So, this is how you've decided to play it. Quite clever, Gustav said internally while still staring at Endrick. Endrick seemed to be comfortable standing in midair, far from his reach. Fwaya! Fwy! Fwy! Before Gustav could think of a plan, the balls of liquid flames wrapped in Endrick's will began to descend heavily from every direction. Chapter 499. Before Gustav could think of a plan, the balls of liquid flames wrapped in Endrick's will began to descend heavily from every direction. Sui-ai! Sui-ai! Each ball of liquid flames was the size of a fist, and them shooting forward in multiple numbers made it even harder for them to be dodged. Gustav started moving from place to place as he dodged the descent of these projectiles. His body traveled in a zigzag format as he did his best to avoid those that he could. As Gustav jumped upwards to dodge a few, more of them arrived for him from above. He spun severally in midair while stretching out his right hand with the milky-colored blade in his grasp. Multiple balls were sliced in half as his body traveled in midair. He swung the milky blade all around him with speed, clearing multiple balls of liquid flames headed towards him again. Gustav started dashing towards the front while swinging his hand out with speed. His hand movements were blurry, so fast that in a single swing, over 7 of these projectiles would be cleaved in half. Atomic disintegration was powerful enough to make parts of the liquid flames that came into contact with it disappear. While Gustav was making his way forward, Endrick kept sending out more and more of these. However, Gustav was so fast that even with the speed of these projectiles, he was able to see them in a slower motion and move in their midst while cutting them down. Endrick's plan was pretty smart. Knowing that he couldn't defeat Gustav in physical strength, he decided to stay as far away as he could while sending out long-range attacks to drain Gustav. Energy discharge has been activated. Boom! Ripple-like energy suddenly blasted forth from Gustav's being into the surroundings, clearing the projectiles headed for him. Gustav had a clear path in front of him at the moment, and dashed forward properly. His body transformed once again, turning dark as he grew ram horns out of his forehead with another pair of fangs. He had added the demonic sonic bunny to his combination of transformation. Scree! Gustav opened his mouth as he arrived back at the ledge of the platform, causing sonic waves to blast out from them. Endrick quickly conjured a telekinetic barrier in front of him to block the sonic waves. Bang! A loud blasting sound rang out as he was sent flying once again along with the barrier. Gustav didn't stop. He continued on with the scream until Endrick's telekinetic barrier shattered, and the energy knocked him flying once again after directly making contact with him. Endrick felt his head throbbing immensely as the scream not only affected his body but his mind too. After blasting him across several hundred feet, Gustav's sonic scream was out of range, and he had to deactivate it. Endrick's body was still flying across the air as he spat out blood, and his eyes turned bloodshot. His ears and head were ringing badly, and he was finding it hard to see due to his vision getting blurry. As he reached the rising limit from the force of the blast, his body started descending once again. Everyone's eyes focused on his descending body, and he could see blood dripping from his figure as he fell towards the surface of the river of flames. The flames were so hot that his blood evaporated before even reaching the surface. Endrik himself had some burn marks on his skin at the point due to nearly falling into it the other time. And this time, it looked as if this was truly the end for him. I admit, you're truly more powerful than I am, big brother. But I cannot let it end here, Endrik said internally as he squinted his eyes forcefully and spread his hands. SWWWHHHHH. He once again conjured another telekinetic board and fell on it. As expected, this prevented him from falling into the river of flames. Endrik once again stood to his feet and stared at Gustav from his position far from the battle platform. He was currently over 1,000 feet away from the platform, standing in midair above the river of flames. The spectators had to acknowledge Endrik for doing this well so far. They thought it would be an easy battle for Gustav, especially since he could conjure an attack that could literally end everything in an instant. To their surprise, it wasn't quite so, and they didn't understand that Gustav couldn't use that attack in a battle like this because he would also be putting himself in harm's way. You can't get to me from here, can you? This will be the end for you, Endrik voiced out as he stretched both hands towards the river of flames again. Everyone once again saw the outline of a circle on the surface of the river of flames. They instantly understood that Endrik was using that powerful attack again. Endrik was right. From this position, Gustav's sonic screams couldn't reach that far, but Gustav had other alternatives, unlike what Endrik thought. Gustav raised his hand, and orbs began to appear all over the place around him. Gravitational energy container bloodline has been activated. When everyone saw these orbs, they were first filled with shock, remembering the display event. The first thoughts that came to their minds were, he can create this many? But then they noticed that this one seemed different from the one he had used on that day. The energy orb Gustav used the other day was reddish and black in color, with purplish electric arcs swimming across its body, while the ones Gustav had just conjured were bluish and didn't look intimidating in any way. This was because Gustav conjured a normal gravitational energy container orb that was currently empty without any energy. Blue circles began to appear around Gustav's arms as flames appeared around his palm, which he began shooting into the balls. These balls started storing the energy Gustav was inputting in them while Endrik was also lifting the massive bowl of liquid flame from the pool underneath him. Chapter 500. Gustav didn't waste any time. All 57 orbs he conjured had both bluish and reddish colors at the moment, as they floated further into the air. Gustav raised his hand and swung it forward like a general telling his army to go forth into battle. Endrik's eyes squinted even more as he saw the orbs charging towards him in midair. He had raised the bowl of liquid flame several feet into the air already, but it wasn't enough. Not wanting to be disturbed, he controlled his telekinetic board to move with his mind while still focusing on lifting the massive bowl of liquid flames. Swee-wee-yee! Swee-wee-yee! Endrik moved out of the way, trying to dodge the first orb. However, the moment it zoomed past him, what came next was an explosion. Boom! The impact sent Endrik flying towards the side as his will got disconnected from the massive bowl of liquid flames and began to fall back towards the river of flames. The impact of the explosion of one orb only covered a radius of around 50 feet, so it wasn't powerful enough to seriously injure Endrik. However, it disrupted his attack. Endrik quickly stabilized himself and conjured a telekinetic bubble-like barrier around him before stretching his hand in the direction of the massive falling bowl of flames. HHHGHHH! He groaned loudly as he wrapped his will around the liquid flames to prevent them from falling back into the river underneath. The other orbs had arrived around him at the moment, and more explosions began to go off. Boom! 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 The explosions slammed forcefully into Endrik's telekinetic barrier, but were unable to break through. It was shaky on the inside, but Endrik made sure to focus on lifting the massive bowl of liquid flames once again. Veins popped out on his neck and arms as he raised them up with intensity. He was determined to successfully drop this on the platform once again. Gustav's eyes squinted as he made more orbs and sent them forward with speed. They were both unrelenting. However, in the next few seconds, Hendrik sensed his telekinetic bubble barrier cracking apart. The massive ball of fiery liquid was already close to 50 feet in the air, but this still wasn't enough height. Gustav swung his hand forward, sending about 30 more balls towards Hendrik's position. He made them surround Hendrik's barrier, covering up his vision completely. Hendrik already knew that this attack would definitely cause his barrier to be destroyed, so he started activating an ability he had gained recently. Space cloning will form projection. Hendrik closed his eyes as he said internally. Zoom. His vision suddenly turned completely blue while his eyes were closed, and he began to see through his closed eyes. From his line of sight, the entire environment was blue along with every living being. His line of sight zoomed in on Gustav's position thousands of feet away. It was like having a flying camera type of vision as his line of sight arrived right behind Gustav. At this point, Hendrik's barrier had been completely covered by the orbs, so within it was completely dark. It was at this moment that Gustav made them detonate once again. Boom! 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 Multiple explosions rang out all at once, this time destroying the barrier completely. As the energy of the explosions cleared, Hendrik could be seen standing in place while closing his eyes. Gustav swung 2 of his fingers forward, controlling the rest of the orbs in the vicinity to move towards the defenseless Hendrik. However, at this moment, Gustav suddenly sensed something behind him. He paused his attack as he tried moving out of the way, but he was too slow. SRHHYYYHHH. A bluish-colored dagger pierced into Gustav's left side in the process of trying to dodge. Gasped. The entire crowd was left shocked as they saw the glowing blue dagger lodge 2 inches into Gustav's side. No one witnessed how it got there. They only saw it appear in Gustav's body. How didn't it go deeper? Hendrik also had a look of shock on his face as he opened his eyes. This ability takes a lot of energy. I can't waste any time. Hendrik decided not to dwell on that and continued lifting the massive bowl of flames upwards. Gustav swung his hand as he turned around, but he didn't make contact with anything or anyone. The bluish glowing dagger stabbed into his body disappeared into thin air in the next second, and blood flowed down, soaking that part of his uniform. That was quite the trick, Gustav said internally as he raised his guard and took a battle stance. Suddenly he felt something of force from his right side. Bang! As Gustav turned to the side, he got hit before he could stop it, causing his body to slide several feet backward. Gustav's eyes squinted as he threw a kick forward, followed by a punch, and crouched down to do a leg sweep. Even with all this, he didn't make contact with anything or anyone. It was like the force that hit him could make its presence appear and disappear at will. It was so good that he wouldn't be able to sense it with his perception until it was only a centimeter away from making contact with him. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav activated God Eyes to study the wave of energy in the air and use it to uncover the movement of this unknown and invisible force. Gustav was confused because all but he could see around him were glowing bluish lights that spread across the place. Deactivated God Eyes, he couldn't see these lights, but activating them, he could see them everywhere around him. He was literally basking in the glow of these blue lights, and he couldn't shake them off. Gustav suddenly felt the strange force coming from his side again, and turned around to swing forth his leg. Knowing that he would still get hit since he decided to throw out his attack as well. Bang! Bang! 2 sounds of collision rang out as Gustav managed to land a hit on the strange force a moment after he got hit. Check out my new story Chronicles of Azeroth. Add it to your library, vote and comment. If up to 1,000 people add it to their library before next weekend, he'll do a 5 chapters mass release for the Bloodline system. Thank you all. Chapter 501. Bang! Bang! 2 sounds of collision rang out as Gustav managed to land a hit on the strange force a moment after he got hit. Fly! He slid back by a few feet and stabilized himself with a look of surprise on his face. Aside from the stabbing earlier, all hits barely had an effect on his body. Now that he managed to hit the force responsible for these sneak attacks, Gustav sensed something. It feels like a person, Gustav said internally as he once again prepared himself for the next hit. Gustav had been studying the pattern of this strange invisible force, so he stood in place while waiting. Combination has been activated, sprint plus dash. He suddenly activated this and combined dash and sprint, increasing his speed level multiple times. The strange force was felt again at this moment, headed for his spine area. In that split moment, Gustav turned around with immense speed and reached out. Bam! He grabbed hold of what felt like a fist and held it in place. Got you, Gustav said internally as he reached out with his left palm. Palm strike has been activated. His palm traveled forward with speed, causing ripples of breeze to scatter across the place as it slammed heavily into what seemed like a chest to Gustav, tearing through it. Gustav still kept God eyes activated. For a few moments, he noticed a bleeping body outline twitching in and out of existence. Within its chest was Gustav's left arm. In the next second, it disappeared along with all the small blue dots in the vicinity. Gustav had deactivated combination at this point. He didn't combine sprint and dash initially because of the high amount of energy it consumes. As this was why he needed to use it at the precise moment when he was sure the attack of the unknown force was going to appear. So, it was like an invisible clone? How is the kid able to do that? Gustav was so surprised as this didn't make sense to him. However, there was no time to think about this at the moment because Gustav suddenly felt an immense amount of heatwave from above. He turned around and looked up, only to see the massive bowl of liquid flames hovering above the platform. The time he had spent dealing with the invisible clone allowed Endrik the chance to pull this stunt. Endrik smiled from his current position thousands of feet away as if he was saying, "I win." Pa! Snapping his finger, the massive bowl of liquid flames began to fall towards the platform once again. Fyi! It carried so many heatwaves more intense than before and cast a blazing red light upon Gustav and the platform amidst its descent. Gustav once again had to turn around with speed, charging in the other direction to leave its range. Even though he currently had heat resistance activated, which currently consumed a lot of energy, he could still feel the searing hotness of the descending mountain-sized liquid flames. Burn marks had already appeared on his skin as the hot liquid flames got closer. Boom! Gustav felt the blast of heat behind him as parts of the liquid slammed into the platform behind him, and some were close to dropping on him. Swoosh! Luckily Gustav managed to dash past the range of collision just in time. However, the shockwaves mixed with immense heat still slammed into him from behind, catapulting him forward. Gustav somersaulted across the air repeatedly as his uniform caught fire from behind. Krrryyhhh. 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 More cracks appeared all over the floating platform at this point in time. The spectators all had widened eyes as they stared at the splits on the platform increase more and more. All of a sudden, grrrhhyyhhh bam! A loud crumbling sound was heard as the platform split into 3 parts from the middle. Gasp! More rocks from the battle platform continued to crumble into the river of fiery hot liquid. Krrryyhhh. It didn't look like it was over yet, as the parts that got split broke into several smaller parts as well, and some even sunk into the river of flames. The crowd was stunned as they noticed that Gustav happened to be standing on the side of the platform that only covered around a radius of 200 feet. Some of them tensed up after noticing the large cracks on the platform that seemed to be increasing even more. Gustav, at this point, already tore the upper part of his uniform once again. His entire upper body was in full display, and everyone could see the scorch marks on his back and shoulder, which indicated just how hot the liquid flames were. Gustav's back that was stabbed initially had stopped bleeding, and everyone could hardly see any signs of injury. Dash. Did he already take a healing pill? This was everyone's thoughts because they had expected this injury to incapacitate Gustav a lot, especially since it was a sneak attack. Still, here he was standing like he had received no damage whatsoever. During the battle, it was nearly impossible to take a healing pill because your opponent wouldn't even give you the chance to heal yourself. The spectators also didn't see Gustav bringing out a healing pill, so they were confused. Gustav, on the other hand, stood on his broken part of the platform with a look of intrigue. The part of the battle platform he was currently standing on was drifting further away while the other parts in the vicinity kept crumbling into the river. Endrik was up to 6,000 feet away from Gustav's current position, still standing on his telekinetic board while staring at his small outline with a gloating look. KRRYYHH. Bam! KRRYYHHH. Bam! The space on the platform Gustav found himself broke apart even more, and there were only about 50 feet more room left on it. From the looks of things, it was only a matter of time before this one sunk into the river. Chapter 502. Gustav scoffed as he closed his eyes and transformed back into his normal form to reduce the weight on the platform. 6,000 feet distance. The spectators were still watching with looks of interest, wondering why Gustav closed his eyes. Smirk. So foolish to assume I cannot get to your position just because of distance, Gustav voiced out as he opened his eyes. Super jump has been activated. Gustav suddenly squatted with speed as his calves bulged with power before leaping forward. The grab of the platform he was initially standing on blasted into pieces as his body shot forward like an asteroid flying across space. Endrik, along with the entire crowd, had shocked looks as Gustav crossed over 4,000 feet in a matter of a few seconds. Endrik quickly activated his will again and sent a telekinetic force forward to knock Gustav down while in midair. Gustav, at this point, already had the orbs floating around himself as he traveled forward. He was only about 500 feet away from Endrik's position when he sensed the pressure coming from above. Gustav controlled the orbs to surround his feet position and detonated them in the next instant. Boom! A loud blasting sound reverberated across the place as Gustav's being was given another boost, crossing the 500 feet gap in nearly an instant. Whoosh! His figure phased through the explosion behind like a phantom as he arrived in front of Endrik, who was wide-eyed at this point. Both their eyes made contact as Endrik tried creating a telekinetic barrier in front of him as fast as he could while Gustav's right arm was already traveling forward. Gustav's arm tore straight through the telekinetic barrier before it could form and grabbed hold of Endrik's neck as he landed on the telekinetic board. Ugh! Endrik made a loud choking sound as Gustav held him up while tightening his fist around his neck. Before Endrik could react to that, Gustav's left fist was already headed for his belly. Bang! A loud sound reverberated across the place as blood shot out of Endrik's mouth the instant Gustav's fist drove into his gut. Gustav pulled his arm back again and threw another punch forward while still holding onto Endrik's neck. Bang! Endrik spat out blood again onto Gustav's face as he felt his internal organs getting pummeled. Gustav wasn't even bothered about the blood as it rolled down his face. Endrik was still choking, and he was about to throw another one when he felt the telekinetic board underneath him getting unstable. He instantly understood that dealing with Endrik would cause the telekinetic board to disappear, and both of them would fall into the river of flames below. But I'm not done with you, Gustav muttered as he leaped off the telekinetic board with Endrik still in his grasp. He landed on a small rock in front that was floating above the river's surface of flames. Bang! He drove another fist into Endrik's chest, this time the instant he landed there before jumping off again. His body traveled several hundred feet across the air, and in the process. Bang! 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 Endrik received hits on his chest, face, gut, sides, and even ribs. Gustav was finally reaching the end of the fiery river towards the south side. He could see the rocky walls up ahead, which also extended to the top where some of the spectators were situated. At this point, Endrik's whole face was smeared with blood, along with his white uniform, which was currently blood red. He was bleeding from almost every part of his body, including parts that Gustav didn't make contact with due to the force of Gustav's attack. His strength. I can't contend, Endrik had tried to break free many times and use his abilities. However, every time he tried, he was disrupted by Gustav's attack. Every hit rocked his internal organs, making him feel immense pain. He had almost passed out at this point, and was left remembering his time with Officer Mag. Gustav landed on another piece of a small rock. He leaped upwards with immense force while pushing Endrick's body forward as they closed in on the rocky wall up ahead. The spectators in that part of the hall quickly moved away in fright. Bang! The entire place trembled intensely as Endrick's body crashed into the wall, creating a massive pit. Gustav kept pushing him forward with the remaining force left from the leap, using his body to create a deeper hole within the wall and breaking through several hardened internal parts. The tremors stopped after a few seconds, and everyone stared at the hole created within the wall from their positions. Chatter! 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 The voices of the cadets could be heard in the background as they stared at the hole. Bang! 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 The loud sound of someone getting hit kept reverberating from the hole. Those with great eyesight could see a little bit while others wondered what was happening now. The instructors spectating as well all had looks of pity on their faces. How else did anyone think this would go? Endrick was smart enough to use the location to his advantage, but this was why Gustav was still known as the most powerful for a reason. They could see Endrick receiving more hits from Gustav within the hole. Endrick's eyes finally rolled to the back after vomiting a mouthful of blood once again. Gustav threw him to the floor within the dark hole one more time and stomped his head into the ground before picking up his unconscious body. He slowly walked towards the opening of the hole while pulling Endrick by the neck. Arriving at the ledge, he stretched out his hand in which Endrick was in his grasp. He stared at the river of liquid flames bubbling up beneath while holding Endrick up a few feet in front of the ledge, ready to release him into the river of flames. 1 hour ago. This pill will bring out your latent potential for 2 minutes, causing you to skip several levels. With this, you will be powerful enough to defeat even a senior class cadet as long as you utilize that time. However, it takes 1 hour to activate after consumption, and your bloodline potential will reduce by a step after this. If you don't want this one, you can also go for other options. Endrick listened to the voice coming from the communication device in front of him as he stood in the middle of his room with a red pill in his palm. The battle ends in the... Who do you think will come out on top? Chapter 503. Endrick listened to the voice coming from the communication device in front of him as he stood in the middle of his room with a red pill in his palm. "I'm taking this one," Endrick voiced out in response. "Are you sure?" "It's gonna..." Before the person on the other end of the communication could complete their sentence, gulping sounds were heard in the room. Endrick had already swallowed the pill. Enhancement pills that have this kind of effect are dangerous for young mixed bloods such as yourself and also illegal, but the MBO won't be able to find out that you took such a pill. Every trace of it within you disappears the moment its activation period ends, and this one was created by our finest scientists, so the only side effect will be... Tap! Endrick tapped the deactivation button and closed his fist. Bang! The communication device was instantly smashed to pieces after he made that action. "Enough of your yapping in my ears. It's time," Endrick voiced out with a solemn tone as he turned around to leave his room. In the Hall of Doom, Gustav still had Endrick's neck in his grasp and his arm outstretched in front of the ledge of the dark hole. Endrick's battered and unconscious body hovered around 70 above the river of flames. Gustav's fingers were slowly releasing from Endrick's neck, and just as he was about to let go of Endrick completely, a strange wind suddenly started blowing across the place coming from Endrick's being. In the next instant, Endrick opened his eyes, revealing a set of blue irises and dark blue pupils that were bordering on purple. They glowed with ominous light as he stared directly into Gustav's eyes. Before the crowd could understand what was happening, a powerful force suddenly blasted out from Endrick's being. Shrew-boom! Gustav, who was hit at point-blank range by the blast, got sent crashing backward with intensity. The entire hall vibrated due to this blast, and even some spectators were blasted backward. The instructors quickly swooped in and protected the cadets from the energy of the blast. KRRYYHHH! KRRYYHH! Lots of spectators had to move away from the ledge of the circular passageway due to some parts of the wall crumbling and falling into the river of flames. As the intensity died down, everyone stared at the position where Endrik was initially situated and found out that he was no longer there. Instead, he was about 200 feet behind, hovering above the river of flames while his eyes continued to glow the ominous light. The immense pressure coming from him at this moment caused everyone's eyes to widen as they wondered what was going on. This pressure was only felt when Gustav unleashed his most powerful attack back then in the display event, yet Endrik was emitting this same pressure without even unleashing any attack. Gustav, who was blasted backward earlier, pulled himself out of the new hole his body created after blasting into the end of the hole earlier. What was that? Gustav asked internally with a confused expression. Things just got dangerous. Endrik's energy level suddenly spiked. His current strength level is at the Echo rank. The system announced. What? How is that possible? Gustav asked internally with a tone of shock. I sensed a kind of. Before the system could complete its statement, Gustav suddenly felt a strong tug. Why? It was so powerful and instantaneous that his entire being got pulled out of the hole with speed. The instant he adjusted to what had just happened, he noticed a fist headed for his face up front. It wasn't actually headed for his face was the one heading towards the incoming fist, which belonged to Endrik. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as Gustav was sent flying backward with his arms in an X format. Endrik, who had just performed that attack, stretched out his hand again, causing Gustav's catapulting body to halt for a moment before pulling him towards his direction again. Gustav was unable to react in time before he felt the tug on his body again, and found himself traveling towards Endrik once again. Bang! Fists after fist were sent out as Endrik continuously repeated this action, but Gustav was able to prevent himself from getting directly hit each time. However, he was taking damage even though he was able to block the hits because each punch felt like a mountain was slamming into him, and he was unable to fight back because Endrik's will had suddenly undergone a big transformation which was letting him control Gustav as he pleased. Endrik stopped Gustav's catapulting body and swung his hand towards the side. Why? Gustav repeatedly spiraled across the air before slamming into the side of a rocky wall. Bang! Endrik swung his palm again. Why? An invisible force crashed into Gustav's body the instant he slammed into the wall. Endrik repeated the same action. Bang! 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 The powerful force kept ramming into him, drilling him into the wall and causing it to crumble. At this point, the crowd was astonished, wondering what was happening. All this had happened in less than a minute, and it had been so quick that they could hardly follow what was happening. Gustav felt the solid invisible wall slamming into him over and over again, causing bone-cracking sounds to ring out. Blood oozed out of his mouth and nose as he quickly began to transform. Scree! He quickly shot out sonic waves from his mouth to fend off the next telekinetic attack. Bang! The collision was made as Endrik's invisible force was stopped for a few seconds, but Gustav found it extremely hard to keep it up as the force kept pushing his sonic screams backward. Gustav quickly pulled himself from the massive rectangular hole created in the wall due to Endrik's force and leaped off it. Bang! The force crashed into his initial position and caused debris to scatter all across the place. Gustav's body that was currently in midair increased in size. Chapter 504. Size manipulation has been activated. This always helped in reducing the speed at which Endrik could wrap his will around his body. Gustav's right arm turned massive as he swung it forward with force. It continued increasing in size as it traveled towards Endrik's body up front. Bang! Gustav suddenly felt something block his massive fist the instant it was only a few feet away from slamming into Endrik. Endrik turned towards the side and stared at him. In the next instant, Gustav's massive body was swinging towards the side once again. Bang! 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 In a matter of 10 seconds, Gustav had been thrown from place to place all across the rocky walls at the edge of the fiery river over 100 times. It was as if he couldn't even fight against Endrik's will. Endrik once again reached his hand forward and pulled Gustav out of the hole in which he buried him last after tossing him across the place repeatedly with his will. Gustav felt his head spin a little as he found himself floating several 10 feet away from Endrik in midair. Endrik stretched both his hands outwards and began to separate them like he was pulling something apart. This same action led to Gustav feeling a strange force wrap around his arms and began pulling them apart. Both his arms were being pulled away from each other with force. Endrik was doing it effortlessly like he was pulling a thread. Meanwhile, Gustav felt like he was being ripped in half by the force of 2 mountains tied to his right and left hand. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav quickly activated size manipulation, and instead of growing bigger in size, his body instantly shrunk. His body decreased by a foot, causing him to be released from Endrik's will. Endrik was taken aback by this, and just as he wanted to grab hold of Gustav's tiny frame with his telekinesis, multiple orbs suddenly appeared around him and exploded. Boom! 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 The instant this happened, Gustav increased in size once again and stretched out his hand to grab hold of the wall by the side. As the explosion cleared, Endrik couldn't be seen in the same position anymore. He had appeared several 100 feet behind. Gustav leaped forward once again with force as Endrik also sent forth his will only for Gustav to shrink in size again, confusing Endrik. Gustav appeared in front of him before unshrinking with an uppercut traveling towards his jaw. Zing! Endrik suddenly blitzed hundreds of feet towards the side, dodging the punch. This action shocked Gustav as his fist went through thin air. Endrik swung his palm forward, sending an invisible wall towards Gustav again. Gustav shrunk once more and landed on a small rock in front before leaping upwards again. His attack on Endrik failed 3 more times due to him blitzing away like he was teleporting several times. Endrik suddenly decided he had had enough and raised his hand high up, conjuring a large invisible force above. A strange pressure suddenly blanketed a radius of 5,000 feet around them, causing fierce winds to blow across the place. The instant Endrik swung his hand down, a massive invisible palm descended with force upon the river. Gustav was caught in the middle of this and couldn't get away, so he quickly increased in size, becoming up to 1,000 feet tall, and stretched both his legs from wall to prevent himself from falling into the river as the massive invisible palm descended. Bang! Crumbling sounds reverberated across the entire environment as Gustav bore the weight of this enormous palm, which pushed down on his shoulders, causing his back to tremble. Endrik stood in place staring at him for a few moments before reaching out again and wrapping his will around Gustav. Why? He raised his second hand and caused another massive invisible palm to descend upon the place. Bang! The instant it landed, Gustav lost his foot as both palms sent him crashing towards the river of flames while he decreased in size. Gasped! The entire crowd had widened eyes as they stared at Gustav falling into the river of flames. Gurpled! They couldn't believe their sights as they saw his body sink into it. Endrik finally released the pressure on the vicinity, and stared at the location where Gustav fell in with a look of pity. 10 seconds left, he said internally as his eyes slowly began to dim. Dash. Is it over? Dash. Gustav lost? Dash. How is this possible? The spectators all had looks of astonishment and confusion. They had witnessed what had just happened with Endrik and his sudden massive leap in strength, which made no sense to them. Dash. Hey, isn't that? While everyone was arguing about what just went down, the shocked voice of a cadet brought them back to reality. Everyone seemed to have noticed the reddish-brown orb cackling with purplish electricity floating behind Endrik at the same time, and their eyes widened as they recognized this orb. Endrik turned around the instant he sensed it, and that was when. Boom! It exploded with intensity. Endrik had blitzed away in the last moment, while quickly conjuring multiple barriers of telekinesis around him. The instructors in the vicinity also sprung into action at the exact same moment, using their abilities to conjure protective layers around the edges of the fiery river to protect the spectators from the blast. Boom! The bright dark red shockwaves spread across the place, carrying immense power and pressure with it. It covered a radius of 3,000 feet in nearly an instant, obliterating everything in its path. A massive hole was being torn open within the river of flames that kept expanding as the blast also did. The walls vibrated with intensity. Meanwhile, Endrick's telekinetic barrier was being torn through layer after layer. He couldn't outrun the blast and found himself within it. He still had kept putting more up as they were consumed, because the moment he ran out of energy to conjure barriers, it would be his end. Luck, however, did not seem to be on his side as his eyes turned dim in the next second. "Time up," Endrick said internally with a look of despair, as he felt the energy within him shriveling up. "I know I said it was gonna end in this chapter, yet it's took longer than I expected. It will definitely end in the..." Chapter 505. Time up, Endrick said internally with a look of despair, as he felt the energy within him shriveling up. The telekinetic barrier surrounding him started getting ripped apart as the reddish waves of energy threatened to consume and obliterated anything in its path. Endrick tried as much as possible to keep the barriers up and create new ones while amid these destructive waves. However, in a matter of seconds, he had lost all energy within him, and he could not conjure another barrier. Boom! Kiarhhh. As the blast began to die down, a loud scream was heard from within the reddish and black waves of destruction. The spectators witnessed a human-shaped body get blasted out from within the waves towards the far south. The orb destroyed the surrounding walls and caused the barriers protecting the spectators to nearly get destroyed. Later on, the waves began to shrink down. In a few moments, it shrunk completely into a small blue dot and disappeared. Meanwhile, a massive amount of the river of flames beneath was missing. The level of the river of flames beneath had reduced by a lot, and all the rocks that were initially floating above the surface had been totally destroyed. Walls had crumbled, and the river of flames had increased in length due to the destruction of some of the barricades. Everyone wasn't really focused on this at the moment because they could see Endrick's body being blasted far towards the back. Their eyes were widened because his left arm was missing along with his right foot down to the knee area. Half his face was charred black, and blood oozed out of multiple parts of his body like a fountain. He was in such a mess that no one knew if he was conscious or not. While he was being blasted backward and close to reaching the other side of the nearly crumbled wall, a loud blast was suddenly heard from the river area again. Thum 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 thum. Several long and thick-looking icicle-like spears shot out of several parts of the river below. Thum one directly shot out of the river close to the location Endrick was headed for and stabbed straight into his right shoulder from underneath, hooking him in place. Gasped! The spectators gasped as they noticed Endrick hanging up several hundred feet above the river with the icicle-like spear in his left shoulder area. For everyone's eyes widened again as the river of flames blasted open once again, and a pillar that looked similar to the massive icicle-like spears shot out of it with someone standing atop it. Dash! It's Gustav! Multiple shouted out at the same time. Dash! He's alive? Dash! How did he survive that? Chatter! 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 Voices of confusion broke out in the background as everyone watched Gustav rise along with the massive pillar he was standing on, which was shooting out of the river of flames underneath. Those with keen eyesight noticed that the instant his body shot out of the river of flames with the pillar, he was covered in some weird-looking layers which disappeared as he rose. Some of them already guessed that these layers were why he didn't get incinerated within the river. Still, they had no idea what it was or how thick it was to withstand the insane high temperature from the river of flames. Gustav arrived in front of Endrick, who was hanging up in the air with the icicle-like spear stabbed into his right shoulder. Gustav could see that half his face had been completely obliterated along with his left arm. Gustav was also looking a bit battered, but his eyes still shone with a fierce light, his face remained cold and unbothered, and his presence grew powerful as he slowly walked forward. The pillar that he was standing on had a large space above that covered up to 50 feet, so he had to walk forward a bit for him to be directly in front of Endrick. Step! 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 The entire atmosphere turned extremely tensed as they watched Gustav take his time in walking towards Endrick's elevated body. It was only about 5 seconds, but it felt like 5 minutes because everyone could tell that the defining moment had arrived. Gustav stood in front of Endrick's body and stretched out his hand to place it on Endrick's jaw before slowly lifting his head to stare at his face. Black blood was rolling down his darkened face along with specks of tears even though his eyes were closed. Savor your last moments very well. They will be filled with pain, Gustav said before pulling Endrick further towards him, which caused the icicle-like spear to pierce into his shoulder even deeper. Blurg Endrick vomited out blood on Gustav's chest, which he ignored. Gustav arched back his left arm and drove it forward with force, punching Endrick in the gut once again. Bang! Blood splattered all across the place because, unlike last time, Endrick didn't have a telekinetic protective vest wrapped around his body anymore due to low energy. Gustav slowly pulled his fist back, covered with blood that dripped down his wrist and fell into the river of flames below. Everyone watching had looks of pity on their faces. Some couldn't even keep watching as they felt Gustav should just put Endrick out of his misery quickly instead of torturing him like this. Officer Mag was among the people that could no longer keep watching. She turned away with a crestfallen expression as the sounds from behind kept pounding away in her head, giving her an uncomfortable feeling in her gut. Bang! 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 The entire place had turned silent at this point, and all that could be heard was the sound of Gustav's fist occasionally slamming into Endrick's defenseless body. Endrick spat out blood for the umpteenth time as tears rolled down his face. Moon! Dee. He muttered weakly, causing Gustav to pause his fist that was initially driving towards Endrick's face. Chapter 506. Moon. Dee. He muttered weakly, causing Gustav to pause his fist that was initially driving towards Endrick's face. Even in this situation, you still call on the names of the people who ruined your life, Gustav voiced with a cold tone. Hostage. I'm sorry THYH, they are going to die. Gustav heard Endrick mutter gibberish, causing his face to show a confused expression. Huh! Is this supposed to be a last-ditch attempt to milk sympathy from me? Gustav scoffed as he responded. Not gonna work, kid. Gustav added with an unbothered expression as he prepared to finish Endrick once and for all. Endrick kept muttering gibberish, but Gustav had closed his ears to all that. He could tell that Endrick was trying to apologize for his wrongs, but it was far too late now. Gustav's right hand slowly transformed into that of the mutated bull, becoming massive and muscular. He arched his hand back with intensity while tightening his fist as he amassed energy within his entire arm. There was no way this punch wouldn't pierce straight through Endrick with what everyone had witnessed so far. Ealdris, Falco, Team E, and Rhea all stared in Gustav's direction with conflicted expressions. They had already agreed with Gustav that they wouldn't butt in, so they had no choice but to watch. Fwah! Just as Gustav drove his fist forward, a loud scream was heard. Stop! Why? The wind blew across Endrick's face as Gustav's punch paused a few inches from his chest. Gustav squinted his eyes as this was a voice he recognized. He slowly turned around as he sensed a projectile headed for him from behind. Gustav raised his hand and caught the button-sized device that flew towards him from the spectators' area thousands of feet in front. As he lowered his hand after catching the device, he stared in the direction where it came from. Angie! What is this? He voiced out loudly after spotting Angie's frame standing alone on the crumbled passageway in front. Listen to it. She responded loudly as well. This is not the time nor the place for. Before Gustav could complete his sentence, Angie screamed out again. Please! Listen to it! Now! Gustav's eyes remained squinted as he slowly lowered his head to stare at this button-sized device. He picked it up with 2 fingers and placed it on the side of his head. Truinin. The instant it glued to his head, it activated, beeping with blue light. Dash. What is going on? Dash. What are they doing? Dash. Why did he stop? Dash. Is that a mind recording tape on his head? The spectators couldn't understand what was going on right now. The instructors were just as confused with Officer Mag, who thought this was the end for Endrick already. All they could see was Gustav's face slowly changing expressions as he stood in place for the next 2 minutes. Whatever he was listening to was playing in his mind so no one could eavesdrop or tell what was being said. After 2 minutes, he slowly pulled the device from his forehead with a conflicted expression. He gritted his teeth, a look of annoyance. That bastard, Gustav said internally as he turned around to stare at Endrick. Gustav placed his hand on the icicle-like spear and instantly broke it in two before grabbing onto Endrick's nearly unconscious body before it fell off towards the river of flames below. The broken-off part of the spear was still lodged in Endrick's right shoulder, so he quickly pulled it out and placed Endrick on top of the pillar beside him. Dash. What's going on? This was the question ringing in everyone's mind as they witnessed Gustav bring out a healing pill from his storage device and feed it to Endrick. Endrick was nearly out of commission at this point, so he would eventually die even if Gustav didn't end him. However, this recovery pill brought him out of his nearly dead state after a few minutes. Gustav squatted in front of Endrick as he slowly opened his eyes. Forfeit the match, Gustav instructed. Are you not going to kill me? Endrick asked with a weak tone. I'll decide if you're worth staying alive on another day, Gustav responded while standing to his feet. They're safe, he added with a mysterious tone, causing Endrick's eyes to widen in shock. Tears once again rolled down his eyes as he stared at Gustav's frame, which was currently moving towards the edge of the pillar. Why would you spare me? Endrick wondered. Hey, he wishes to forfeit, Gustav called out to one of the instructors. The entire spectators watching were stunned. They still had no idea what was going on, and Gustav's current actions made them confused even more. One of the instructors leaped towards their current position and landed right in front of Gustav. That's not how a death match works, he began explaining. Either you both battle till one person loses their lives or both of you pass out. No one can forfeit unless you both decide to call off the battle unanimously. Gustav turned to the side to stare at Endrick, who also weakly raised his head up and nodded slightly. We're calling it off, Gustav voiced out. Do both parties agree to this? The instructor asked. Yes, both of them voiced out together. The instructor called off the death battle after this, causing a huge uproar within the Hall of Doom. You owe me a lot of explanations. I will listen to what you have to say this time, Gustav voiced out while turning to the side with a serious expression. Then he leaped off the massive pillar in the next instant, arriving on the other end of the roundabout passageway. Endrick still laid atop the massive pillar with a missing arm and half a leg, but he was slowly starting to regain color. Officer Mag landed in front of him a few moments after Gustav left and took him away with her to get medical attention. Chapter 507. Officer Mag landed in front of Endrick a few moments after Gustav left and took him away with her to get medical attention. Gustav left along with the others amidst the stares of everyone in the vicinity. There was even a large crowd of cadets waiting just outside the Hall of Doom. The instant they spotted Gustav leaving, they assumed Endrick was gone, but they were quite shocked to see injuries on his body and half his uniform gone. They had heard the sounds of the vigorous battle from their positions and understood it must have been truly a crazy one. However, they never expected Gustav, who was currently number 1 on the ranking, would use so much effort to defeat Endrick, who was ranked 12th. He opened up a vortex which 5 of them entered and disappeared from everyone's sight. A few moments later, Officer Mag had Endrick in her arms as she flew out of the Hall of Doom. Chatter! 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 This caused another round of confusion, since those who had not witnessed the battle were left wondering what had gone down within the Hall of Doom, and why both brothers were still alive. It would later spread across the camp that Gustav decided to spare Endrick's life at the last moment, and both brothers decided to unanimously cancel the battle. Minutes later, Gustav was within his room with Angie, Ildris, and the others. How did you get this, Angie? Gustav asked while raising the button-sized device in his hand. I got a call from one of the officers to follow her to a secluded place while you and Endrik were battling. She explained to me that there was a package from Miss Amy. According to the package that came with this recording device, Miss Amy mentioned that it was important I got this to you as soon as possible and stop the battle before any of you two died. Angie explained. I see. Looks like she made an investigation just like I asked. Gustav muttered in response, causing all of them to have a slightly confused look on their faces. A week back, when Gustav had received the information package from Miss Amy about research from the planet Humbad, she dropped a communication device. Through the device, Gustav would be able to send her a message one time. Gustav initially didn't see any need to use it at first, but then he recalled Endrik's strange changes in personality. So, he decided to ask Miss Amy to investigate if anything was happening outside related to Endrik. This was because he knew Endrik was like a pawn in someone else's hand after finding out about the function of the foreign element in his body. Gustav explained things that had happened within the MBO camp on the device and how Endrik and the formerly unknown group were under the influence of someone on the outside. He hadn't expected Miss Amy to quickly get down to the bottom of the situation in a single week and figure out what was going on. It was as if Miss Amy knew where to look into and, in a matter of days, uncovered the whole thing after linking Endrik's communication with the outside world to young Joe. She figured out the plot and managed to save Gustav's and Endrik's parents, but she was still unable to pin this to young Joe because he had totally erased any form of evidence that would lead back to him. The 2-minute message Gustav listened to back in the Hall of Doom was from Miss Amy breaking down the events to him, and how Endrik was threatened with his parents' lives to accept the death match. Gustav didn't even care about his parents, either did he really care if Endrik lived or died, but the instant he found out young Joe was involved, his entire being trembled with rage. He figured that there was truly a chance that Endrik might have changed. Although this didn't mean his grudge had disappeared. He still wanted to hear everything from Endrik's side because he understood the decision was made against his own free will. Gustav explained part of the situation to Angie, Ildris, and the rest. He didn't give them the full breakdown, but he made them understand that Endrik didn't accept to battle him of his own free will, and there was a chance that Endrik might have truly turned a new leaf. I told you, Gustav. He's still a kid. You should give him a chance, Angie stated. Doesn't change the fact that he holds enough power to burn an entire neighborhood to the ground. Just because he's a kid doesn't mean he shouldn't be held accountable for his actions, especially with the amount of power he holds. Gustav responded with a profound gaze. You're right. Angie couldn't refute his statement. I will hear what he has to say, and decide what to do next from there. Gustav added. I'm glad things turned out this way, though. He has the potential to be a great ally in the future. He voiced out from the side. That's still pending, remember? He can be made to do things against his will. I don't know what's more dangerous, him getting controlled against his will or him pretending to have changed just to put some secretive plans in motion, Gustav stated. Even though Miss Amy had explained things to him, Gustav only gave Endrik the benefit of the doubt. Trusting that he had completely changed was still impossible for Gustav at the moment. Minutes later, all of them left the room, and Gustav was left alone once again. He reminisced about today's events as he channeled his bloodline. It was certainly a crazy day, and he would have been incinerated if not for the power of the Kalapasol. This was the same alien form he took back then in the Kaskia ruins. The Kalapasol could create a tough and solid material from its body called Iro silk. This same Iro silk stopped Gustav's atomic disintegration from cutting through back then. Chapter 508. It could change the form and state of the Iro silk to whatever it wanted, and most times, it chose to make them in the form of spears similar to icicles. All in all, it could create any size or form it desired with the Iro silk, and the Iro silk was tough enough to withstand almost anything. The temperature of the River of Flames wasn't high enough to melt it, even though it was hot enough to incinerate a full-grown adult human before they made contact with its surface. Mixed bloods around Gustav level have tougher bodies, so they could last for about 3 to 5 seconds before they were incinerated completely within. Gustav had a high defense level, so he could last for way longer, but he also would eventually be consumed completely within. Gustav never used the power of the Calapisol in public view because he had to partially or totally transform into the creature before he could materialize Iroh's silk. Doing this in public had the risk of someone recognizing the transformation to be that of an alien form, and right now, no one knew he could take on alien forms. Everyone thought his transformation ability was only based on mixed breeds. If alien forms were added to the mix of revealed information, Gustav could tell that it would cause an adverse effect. After falling into the river of volcanic flames when battling Endrik, Gustav instantly took the form of the Calapisol while sinking into it. After doing that, he wrapped his body in layers of Iroh's silk before he was completely incinerated within. He had already set a trap for Endrik earlier by placing the gravitational energy container orb filled with mixed energy right behind him. It was impossible to notice this due to the orb hiding within a type of gravitational field that only Gustav could see. It only revealed itself when it was ready to explode. Gustav waited at the bottom of the river of flames till he heard and sensed the explosion. His perception within the river of flames was at a high level, so the moment he sensed Endrik being blasted across the place, he conjured spear-like Iroh silks, shooting them out of the river towards Endrik's catapulting body. He missed 3 times due to speed but finally got the 4th one, and this was his cue to leave the river of flames. Even though the Iroh silk was very sturdy, there was no way it wouldn't erode with time. He shot upwards by conjuring a massive pillar of Iroh silk which he stood atop. All this was what led to the scene where he nearly killed Endrik. It had been a very crazy battle, and Gustav was still intrigued about the whole Endrik powering up and the ability he used to delay him by conjuring an invisible clone from thousands of feet away. Gustav decided to put all this off for now since Endrik would come clean to him soon. He decided to keep focusing on channeling his bloodline for now. He would be leaving camp in a few days anyway. Just like that, 3 days went by. During the last 3 days, the hype from the battle between Gustav and Endrik still hadn't settled. Cadets were still going crazy about the whole situation, and some began to compare Endrik to the top 5 cadets on the ranking, saying, "Since Gustav could have a tough time, there's a possibility that Endrik might win against the other 4. This speculation had sparked debates all across the camp, and even though everyone admitted that Gustav was the undisputed number 1, Endrik was not a special class cadet to be trifled with. His potential outranked every single cadet on camp regardless of year. During the last 2 days, Gustav had excused himself from any camp-related activities since he was training for his first mission. He was allowed to do as he pleased during this period, so anyone hardly saw him. Today he finally came out of his room after 3 whole days of secluded bloodline channeling without taking a wink of sleep. He had decided to meet with Vera before meeting with Endrik today to confirm some things. They met in one of the camp gardens, and sat on a chair placed in front of one of the trees. "What is the situation now?" Gustav asked. "My parasitic strains have turned dormant after the battle for supremacy," Vera responded with a low tone. "What? Does that mean you won't be able to take control of him?" Gustav asked. Vera nodded in response. "What of the other foreign element within?" Gustav asked. "It also turned dormant. Both seem to have cancelled each other out after the battle within him," Vera answered. "This is both good and bad. He won't be controlled by young Joe, but I also won't be able to gain control of him. I cannot trust him to act of his own free will," Gustav muttered with a troubled expression. "Can you infect him with more parasitic strains?" Gustav suddenly asked after a few seconds of silence. "He will die if I do that," Vera stated, causing Gustav to go back to his pondering state. "Maybe he has changed. You should try giving him a chance," Vera added. Gustav thought about it for a few seconds before sighing. "All right, let's see how things go," Gustav said before standing to his feet. "Make sure you keep watching over his internal structure and report any change you notice," Gustav instructed before dashing off. Swoosh! Vera's hair blew upwards due to the wind generated from Gustav's speed as she continued staring in his direction even after he had left. Bye. I'll miss you, Vera muttered sadly. In about 2 minutes, Gustav was dashing towards the top of a massive icy top mountain. He arrived at its top in a blink of an eye, where Endrik could be seen waiting for him. For he paused his steps after arriving a few feet in front of Endrik. Half of Endrik's face was wrapped in bandages, and his left arm was back in place, but also wrapped with bandages and strapped to his neck with a kind of rope-like bandage as well. His right foot had also been regrown, but he was still using a walking stick to support himself. Gustav stared at him with an expressionless look as usual, as if he didn't have a hand in Endrik's current state. "I'm listening." Chapter 509. Gustav stared at him with an expressionless look as usual, as if he didn't have a hand in Endrik's current state. "I'm listening," Gustav stated. F. Endrik repeatedly stuttered, trying to make out his first words. Gustav was quite surprised to see Endrik looking tense for the first time. The kid always had a cocky expression, but this time he was genuinely tensed. Endrik lowered his head and let go of his walking stick, causing him to stagger forward. Gustav muttered as he watched Endrik get closer to him. Plop! Endrik dropped to his knees right in front of Gustav with his head lowered. "I know and understand the wrongs I have committed now. I was the worst. I truly hated and despise you for being weak. Father and mother made me think and believe, just like everyone else, that your existence was a useless one. I always got so angry when I saw you making the news, and rumors about you being very powerful were spread back then. I couldn't handle that you, who was labeled as weak and useless, was becoming better than me. I thought it was okay to feel that way. I thought it was okay to despise weakness. I thought it was okay to look down on everyone and treat others however I felt. Miss Mag helped me see the error of my ways." Endrik's voice was laced with heartfelt regret as he spoke. "I know it would be hard to forgive my wrongdoings, but I just want you to give me the chance to make amends," Endrik added while still keeping his head down. "Hard? Borderline impossible," Gustav said while squatting in front of Endrik. "Not only did you do a lot of experimentation using me as your human subject to test out your abilities, you also tried killing me months back. Actually, we tried killing each other, but you came for me first, and you'd be dead by now if it wasn't for Angie," Gustav said with an icy tone. Endrik gulped down saliva as he heard that, and continued looking down with a disturbed expression. She saved your life twice now. Be grateful to her," he added. "I really..." Endrik was about to speak again when Gustav cut him off. "Skip all this bullshit. I'll never be able to trust or accept you. Even if you spend years working to show me that you have changed, it cannot change what you have done in the past," Gustav voiced out. "Did you think you could just come here and mutter the words 'I have changed,' and then I'll accept you as my little brother? Nah, kid, it's not that simple. Left to me, those two you call Mom and Dad would be dead by now because they deserve to be in such a scenario. You're lucky Miss Amy decided to rescue them," Gustav added before standing back to his feet. Endrik remained in position, kneeling with his head down. "I know you can no longer see them as your parents, and I as your little brother, but I will still do my best to change your view of me. I will try everything." Endrik was still in the process of speaking when Gustav interrupted him again. "Don't bother." Gustav cut him short and turned around, facing his back to the kneeling Endrik. "Anyways, this is not why I called you here. Tell me everything about your partnership with young Joe," Gustav instructed. "And I mean everything. Don't leave any detail out," he added with a cold tone. Endrik finally raised his head up to stare at Gustav's back before he began to narrate his ordeal with young Joe. Gustav's facial expressions became complex as he listened to Endrik's narration about the events that went down 5 months earlier. He wasn't told about the whole secluded punishment, so now that he was finding out, he saw the unveil methods as pretty blunt. What made it worse was the fact that young Joe could visit there anytime he wanted. Gustav started to reevaluate young Joe, wondering just how much influence he held within the MBO. Miss Amy would most likely not be able to do something like this so covertly, even though she was just as influential. She was not affiliated with the MBO like she used to. Whereas young Joe went to many meetings for his father, and handled most of their company decisions on technology. From the narration of things, it seemed like young Joe's influence had eaten deep into the MBO without the knowledge of the higher-ups. This felt extremely suspicious to Gustav, as he recalled young Joe wanted to recruit him under his wing, making some crazy promises about getting him to the top of the MBO. As Endrik got to the part of the deal about him getting fooled by the nanites young Joe planted, things clicked for Gustav. Young Joe had proven that he could take control of Endrik's body against his will if he wanted. Still, he promised that it would only happen if Endrik disobeyed any of his commands after his training ended in the MBO. So Endrik felt their contract was still in play even though the nanites were within him. Young Joe stated that they were undetectable, so Endrik shouldn't try playing smart. He also mentioned that there were other pawns that he could use for his convenience within the camp for any plans that he might have. Now that Endrik thought of it, he couldn't understand why young Joe just didn't make use of the nanites to control his body when he disagreed with battling Gustav. He wondered why he had to resort to kidnapping both parents. Endrik also mentioned that there were more officers in camp under young Joe's control and cadets as well that he didn't know of. I see. Seeing as he couldn't get me, he decided to get you to get me instead. Looks like you really got played, Gustav voiced out with a solemn tone after listening to all of Endrik's explanation. Chapter 510. Huh! Endrik voiced out with a tone of confusion. He came to me first. I turned him down, then he went for you and instructed you to kill me, Gustav responded. Oh, so I was just a pawn then? Endrik muttered with a crestfallen expression. Yes, you were. He can't handle refusal, and he also knows that I will be onto him for making such a suspicious proposal to me, so he tried using you to get rid of me, Gustav voiced out as his gaze turned sharp. A decision he'll regret making. Gustav's tone turned extremely chill as he spat out. Do you have names of other officers or instructors under his command? Gustav asked. I don't know any other besides the one that was taken into custody a while back. I was kept in the dark about many other cadets under him that were caught by you as well. I only knew 4 of them, Endrik responded. He was cautious enough. This will make it even harder to deal with those that are still hiding in the shadows, Gustav muttered with a contemplative expression. Anyways, this is already good since we know who we're dealing with now. The MBO is pretty sloppy letting all this happen under their nose, but Young is not so bad as well. Shrewd. With the way Gustav was talking it was hard to tell if he was praising young Joe or pissed with him. Maybe it was both, but Endrik could tell that Gustav was also making analysis. He has no idea that I only have to do one thing to get rid of all his pawns. Only problem is it's gonna be time-consuming and I don't have time, Gustav muttered. Endrik could feel a kind of superior aura coming from Gustav's being. This must be why he's able to handle any situation. He spends time making plans on how to deal with them. Endrik felt this was a trait that he was missing because he usually just jumps into action without thinking of how to properly deal with situations. I still don't feel it was worth it sparing you, but let's see if you will be able to change my mind in the future, Gustav said as he started to walk forward. He suddenly stopped and turned to the side to stare at Endrik with a sharp gaze before speaking. But bear in mind that if you ever make any stupid actions or hurt anyone I care about, I will kill you in the most gruesome way possible after inflicting the worst kinds of pain and torture to the point where you question the significance of your existence and beg for your pitiful life to be extinguished. The bloodthirsty energy oozing from Gustav's being at this point was so heavy that even the winds around them began to howl. Endrik subconsciously took a step back after hearing that. Gustav leaped off the icy mountain a moment later, disappearing from Endrik's sight into the distance. In a secluded office-like space, young Joe sat behind a desk with a dark look on his face as he stared at the group kneeling in front of him. You're telling me that it is no longer possible to take control of Endrick's body? Young Joe voiced out with a low but extremely cold tone. Why? Yes, we can no longer take control of his body. The nanites have gone offline. The middle-aged looking man who spoke was among the kneeling group of people in medial outfits on their knees. First, this woman catches on to the locked-up parents of the kid, and now this? Young Joe stated before standing to his feet. Such incompetence! Young Joe slowly walked forward as he voiced out. The group of 5 kneeling in front of him clad in medical outfits had looks of fright as he moved towards their position. Young Joe arrived in front of the group leader and placed his hand on the head of the middle-aged looking man. Give me one good reason why you deserve to be spared for this disappointment, Young Joe asked with a smile. SSI, sir. It's an NO to my fault, IPR. Promise to work more efficiently next time. The man stuttered as he pleaded with a frightful look. Failure, I asked you to give me a reason, but you gave me a promise instead. I see why you failed. The instant young Joe finished talking, he let go of the middle-aged man's head, and what came next was... Boom! The man's entire head blasted into pieces, causing brain matter and blood to fly across the small room. Plop! The headless body fell to the ground as a fountain of blood kept spewing out of the neck area, staining the floor. Kyr! The rest of the group screamed with frightful looks after witnessing this scene happen right before them. They started shifting backward and pleading for young Joe to spare their lives. But they couldn't escape because right behind them were 2 muscular men clad in black bodysuits. I hope the rest of you have better answers to my question, young Joe said as a smirk appeared on his face while he moved towards the rest. Minutes later, young Joe was walking down a massive glass-like corridor with 2 bodyguards following behind him. The walls were transparent, and massive laboratories in which experiments were being conducted could be seen by the sides. There was a handkerchief in his grasp, which he was using to clean his hands and parts of his suit stained in thick red liquid. Gustav is always finding ways to ruin my plans, young Joe muttered. Good thing he leaves camp in 2 days. Yazria, get ready to implement the elimination plan, young Joe added as they headed towards the exit point up ahead. Yes, sir, young. One of the 2 men in bodysuits answered from behind. The next day arrived, and it was the last day Gustav would be staying in camp because he would be leaving the next day. He was asked to report to the main entrance and exit hall early in the morning to receive a briefing on his first mission. Chapter 511. He was asked to report to the main entrance and exit hall early in the morning to receive a briefing on his first mission. Gustav did as instructed and traveled towards the hall they arrived in on their first day here. In a few minutes he got there and moved towards the tasks deployment section. Here to receive information on my outside mission, Gustav voiced out as he arrived in front of the desk. Name? The female officer on the other side of the desk asked while clacking on the holographic keyboard in front of her. Gustav Crimson, Gustav responded, causing her to look up. Oh, it's you, she voiced out with a slightly surprised look. Commander Celia asked for you to see her in her office the moment you arrive, she added while gesturing towards the direction that led to Commander Celia's office. Gustav nodded slightly in response and turned to the side before he started moving towards Commander Celia's office. He still recalled where her office was located and arrived there with ease. Calm. Gustav knocked twice, and the door slid open, revealing the interior large-sized library-like office. There were shelves of books on both sides and a particular rack with weird-looking artifacts behind Commander Celia's desk. Finally, you've arrived, Gustav, Commander Celia voiced out as Gustav walked in. There was another male officer dressed in an orange-like MBO uniform sitting right in front of her. He also turned to the side to stare at Gustav the moment he walked in. Gradier Zanatus? Gustav voiced out with a surprised expression the instant he spotted the young man's face sitting in front. Gustav, welcome. Gradier Zanatus smiled in response while speaking. Oh, you two have met. I guess that saves me the need for introduction, Commander Celia stated with a delighted expression. What are you doing here? Gustav asked after arriving in front of the desk. Here to brief you on your mission, Gradier Xanatus responded. Yes, just as he said, Gradier Xanatus came here to brief you on this. Commander Cilia stretched out her right hand to Gustav, and within it was a small square-shaped device. Gustav reached out to grab it and activated it. Truinin. A holographic image of a slightly rundown city and a man appeared right above the device. The man had a very rough look. Scruffy 6 inches long and unkempt-looking ash-colored beards. The scar was running down his left eye with a buzz haircut. This man is known as Sahil Fedralski, the right-hand man of a well-known illegal technological battle equipment distributor. He was last seen around the perimeters of Lialuk City, and reports have it that he's hiding within. Currently, there's a civil war in Lialuk City, and the world government has yet to deploy any force to deal with the situation due to the closure of all the city's entry points. The mayor has asked to resolve the situation himself, turning down any outside help, which is why we cannot send forces there. He is bothered about the city receiving more destruction from the intervention of outside forces. This man, Sahil, sneaked in amidst the chaos and is currently hiding out there. The MBO has been on his tail for some time, but he's managed to slip away 2 times, and this time he's using the whole situation as a form of protection. Reports have also come in of how Sahil is secretly distributing advanced firearms, which is causing the situation to worsen. Gradier Xanatus paused at this point to make sure Gustav's attention was still focused on him before continuing. We have a way to sneak in 1 or 2 officers, but we can't send anyone there beyond a certain power level due to the lockdown of the city. If this situation lingers on any further without intervention, not only would the city be in more danger of imminent destruction, but Sahil will also escape once again before we get to him. Gradier Xanatus explained. So, you want me to catch this guy? Gustav voiced out. No, you might not be able to handle him, Gradier Xanatus responded. We want you to infiltrate, find him and the team he's working with in distribution of these advanced firearms, and place a tracking device on Sahil. The instant he leaves the city we would be able to catch him, Gradier Xanatus responded. Oh, I see. Getting close to him and placing a tracking device on him is pretty much him being in my hands already. Are you sure you don't want me to just catch him? That would save everyone the trouble. I mean, I would have already gone through all the trouble to find him, get close to him, and manage to place the device on him. Why not just finish it? Gustav questioned with a look of contemplation. Sahil is not so easy to catch. The moment you show any malicious intent, he uses everything in his arsenal to try and escape, and he's truly a pro at escaping. Placing the tracker on him would be so much easier, Gradier Xanatus explained. I'm pretty sure placing the tracker on him won't guarantee anything if he's the kind of person you're painting him to be. He could catch on to it and deactivate it before he leaves the city, or he could even use it to fool you lots and become more cautious after figuring it out. Gustav also explained from his point of view. Gustav, this is a 3-star mission due to its difficulty level. A first year shouldn't be getting more than a 2-star mission, but the higher-ups believing you're capable enough, which is why you were given this. Commander Cilia butted in. If your intention is to catch him yourself, the mission difficulty level would instantly increase to 5, and we will have to take you off it because it's already more than you're supposed to be able to handle being a 3-star mission, she added. Chapter 512. Alright then. Gustav decided to fold since it looked like they wouldn't give in. So the instant I placed that tracking device on him, it's mission successful for me? Gustav asked, just to be clear. Precisely, Gradier Xanatus responded. This in itself will not be an easy mission to complete, which is why it's a 3-star mission. Talk more of trying to catch him without any backup. The instant he catches on to you or suspects anything, it's game over, Gradier Xanatus added. I see, Gustav noted. His file and other things you need to know about him and Lialuk are all there. Gradier Xanatus pointed at the device in Gustav's hand, which was where all the information was stored. Gustav nodded in response. Also, this case is also linked to a bigger case which involves the one young Miss Amy is working on. So, the success of your mission is paramount, Gradier Xanatus added. Oh? What case exactly is it linked to? Gustav asked with a surprised expression. That is confidential. Bear in mind that you might be meeting her due to the cases being linked. A slight smile appeared on Gradier Zaneta's face as he stated this. Still, he quickly hid the smile from Commander Celia's view. Oh, I see. Gustav nodded. Is this what she meant when she said she rigged my mission? Gustav had the urge to smirk at this point, but he had to act like he knew nothing about this whole situation. Gradier Zanetas kept briefing Gustav about the mission for about 20 more minutes, and how he would have to keep his MBO officer's badge hidden and some other things. It was literally a covert operation that wasn't combat-based, so Gustav didn't really feel as hyped up like he did originally. However, it was without a doubt that this would be his first MBO mission, which would be taking place in a war-based location. Gustav kept in mind that anything could happen. Gradier Zanetas also mentioned the possibility of terrorist organizations using this opportunity to try and implement something, hiding under the guise of the ongoing chaos. So, Gustav had to be very careful and gather a lot of information before he arrived there making a move. Minutes later, Gustav returned to his room to digest the details of his first mission and objective information. Gradier Zanetas had mentioned that transport would be ready to get him down to the location first thing 6 and the next morning. So, he should be prepared and gather every he would need for the trip. According to the briefing, Gustav would be provided with more standard-based equipment that couldn't be found in camp. Also, it had a time duration of 1 month. No one knew how long the civil war would last, but according to the reports, Sahel never stayed in a place for too long to avoid getting caught. Even the 1-month duration was a stretch, but they were hoping Gustav would complete the task within the set period. E and the others later arrived at Gustav's place to mess around with him again. This was the last day they would see Gustav till whenever he was done and ready to be brought back to camp for further training. So long, bro. We'll be here awaiting your return, Ildris voiced out as they sat in a circle. Yeah, well, miss your cooking, he said with a sigh. I for sure won't miss yours, Gustav responded to E sarcastically. Damn, bro, why you got to do me like that? He voiced out, causing everyone to burst out in laughter. They all stayed and chatted with Gustav until it was late in the night before going back to their rooms. Gustav walked out of his room after they had gone to take a stroll around camp. His eyes moved from place to place as he walked around the camp. He hadn't really spent time appreciating the surroundings in the MBO, so he was just noticing that even though things were intense most times, the MBO camp still gave off a peaceful and safe vibe. The clear and starry skies in the distance, along with the windy atmosphere, generated a kind of feeling within him. He had spent the last 6 months here, so he really did get used to seeing the well-structured buildings since the MBO camp was like a city in itself. Now that he was looking around, he could see that there were a lot of male and female cadets moving around in groups showing loving gestures to each other. Gustav looked to the side and saw 2 cadets having a mouth-to-mouth activities behind a tree. The MBO didn't allow sexual activities between cadets, but they were not stopped from forming romantic relationships. They were youngsters. After all, it wasn't necessary to take life so seriously every time. "Wanna be in their shoes?" The system suddenly voiced out in his head. "No. This isn't necessary," Gustav responded. "Yeah, right, keep telling yourself that. I can sense your emotions, so you can't lie to me." The system's cute girl-like voice turned thinner as it spoke. "Shoo." Gustav was about to tell it to get lost again when someone called out to him from behind. "Gustav!" The soft and melodic girlish voice of the person brought him out of his reverie. "Angie." Gustav turned around to stare at the 56 tall, beautiful-looking girl with silver and pink-colored hair. She was dressed in a blue crop top wrapped around her chest, bringing up the pair of buns in front and a khaki short. "Can I join you?" she asked while standing in place. "Sure," Gustav responded, and both of them proceeded to start walking around together. For several minutes there was silence between them as they walked from place to place. After a while, Gustav broke the silence. "It seems you were right," he muttered. Angie exclaimed with a confused expression. Endrick. It looks like he's truly trying to change now, Gustav said while pausing his footsteps a few feet away from a tree in front. Oh. Angie also paused her footsteps just as he did and turned to the side to face him. Sorry. Chapter 513. Oh. Angie also paused her footsteps just as he did and turned to the side to face him. Sorry. Angie's eyes widened as she heard that and stared into Gustav's eyes with a look of awe. You're apologizing? Angie was sure she had never heard that word from Gustav's mouth except on occasions when he was messing around. Well, it turns out you were kind of right, and with the proper guidance Endrick could have been a better person all those years ago. Although, this doesn't change the fact that he committed those misdeeds and I still don't trust him, Gustav explained. A beaming smile appeared on Angie's face as she heard Gustav's words. You were right too, Angie stated. I should be able to make quick decisions in life-threatening situations. I need to be able to be cold and decisive at moments that matter. I don't want to be a burden, neither do I want to be weak. I want to be strong enough to walk beside you and protect everyone I care about and the weak who can't protect themselves. So whatever comes in the future, I will face it without folding, without backing down. I will no longer run from committing violent deeds when it is deemed necessary, she added with a righteous and decisive tone. Her eyes were shimmering with so much confidence that Gustav could tell that Angie had changed so much since their arrival here. He could tell that if she kept training and growing, she would become a very powerful force to reckon with in the future. He already knew this a long time ago. Still, now he was even surer than before because he could see a fire burning within her eyes that weren't there initially. Also, the special class cadets battle she had been involved in showed that she wasn't holding back like she used to. I guess we shall find out sooner or later if you can truly do all those things you mentioned, Gustav responded before moving forward to lean on the tree in front. Angie's smile remained big as she moved towards Gustav's position. Hey, remember the last time we raced? It's been almost a year now. How about you race me again? Angie proposed while leaning on the tree beside Gustav. What? You're interested in losing again? Gustav voiced out with a ridiculing tone. Such confidence for someone who's clearly slower than I am. Angie responded with a ridiculing tone as well. Haha, you do know that speed isn't the only element involved in winning a race, Gustav stated with a light burst of laughter. Just accept, or are you scared of eating my dust? Angie responded with a provocative glance. Alright then, you're on, Gustav said as he stopped leaning against the tree and straightened himself. Hold on. Just like the last time, we need to have stakes, Angie stated. Okay, what do you propose? Gustav asked. If you win, you get to demand anything from me, Angie stated. I'm pretty sure you don't have anything I need, Gustav responded bluntly. Ouch. Are you sure? Angie asked with a slight look of disappointment. Pretty much, yeah. But I might have something to demand in the future, so maybe you'll just go with this, Gustav replied. Angie. So what about you? What would you want from me if you won? Gustav asked. Just one thing. When I win, I want you to do whatever I want you to this night, Angie stated. This night? Alright then. Gustav decided to agree to this. Good, well, race across camp back to this spot. First person to touch the tree behind us wins, Angie stated with an exciting look. Sure, Gustav responded, and they both proceeded to walk a few steps forward before adopting racing stances. On 3, Angie stated while squatting a little. Gustav nodded in response. 3, 2. Sprint has been activated. Gustav decided to activate sprint from the start as this would boost his normal speed by 4 times. At the last second, they both of them breathed out just before. 1. Zwish. Thwowish. They both dashed forward with immense speed, generating massive wind turbulence that caused the nearby trees to bend backward as thousands of leaves blew across the place. The other cadets in the vicinity wondered what caused the disturbance. Both of them disappeared into the distance the moment they dashed forward. It was safe to say no one in camp could compare to Angie and Gustav when it came to speed. Both of them traveled in between line-up of hundreds of trees in a matter of seconds, blasting through the area. Occasionally they had to do a zigzag across the place to dodge the placement of several trees. Still, even after crossing a distance of 5,000 feet, none had outrun the other. Even in the dark of night, Gustav could see like it was daytime, easily dodging obstacles that would be an issue. Angie looked towards the side and could see Gustav blasting through several feet away. She smiled teasingly at him and suddenly increased her speed. Zoom! She instantly gave Gustav a gap of about 30 feet as they arrived on a rocky path that had water flowing on it. Due to the rocks protruding out of different ground parts, it was a bit harder to scale this area. However, Angie still continued to gap Gustav, dashing across the place in a zigzag manner. Even with sprint activated, him struggling to catch up. Gustav was astonished internally as he tried catching up. The officers patrolling this particular area were astonished as they spotted them both dashing past with speed, causing their uniforms to flap intensely. Zoom! Swoosh! From above, the two streaks could be seen heading towards a massive waterfall in front. The silver streak was especially eye-catching as it seemed it would be breaking through the sound barrier soon. Gustav pushed himself further as they closed in on the waterfall. He already knew what was coming, and it was pretty obvious also due to the sound of the gushing water and the increase in the water level as they progressed. Chapter 5:14. Angie arrived there first and leaped forward the instant she stepped on a small rock. Swoosh! She traveled across the air, following the waterfall, dropping towards the stream below. Super jump has been activated. Gustav leaped forward with immense speed after activating super jump. His body traveled several hundreds of feet in the air as his body became blurry while flying over the stream below the waterfall. Angie landed on the stream and kept running forward on the surface of the water body. Meanwhile, Gustav's body continued traveling forward above the small stream. Swoosh! Bang! The instant Angie sped out of the stream, Gustav also landed on the dry land in front. He had closed in the gap between them at this point as they started running forward in between the massive line of up mountains up front. Angie started to put a gap in between Gustav and herself again as the race continued on normal grounds. At this point, it had only been a minute, but they were always halfway to finishing the race. Angie would occasionally let Gustav catch up, then speed up once again, leaving a 30 to 50 feet gap between them. As they arrived at the last mountain in the distance, they ran across its sloppy surface, arriving above it in a matter of a few seconds even though it spanned for several 10,000 feet. Gustav and Angie began to close in on the edge of the mountain top, and would either have to run down its straight surface in front or jump down. Gustav activated super jump again, but this time a smirk appeared on his face. The instant Angie arrived at the edge of this 7,000 feet mountain and was about to run down it, a massive rumbling force was heard behind her. Gustav suddenly leaped upwards with full force, causing a massive blast to spread across the place as chunks of rocks were sent flying. Boom! The blast traveled across the place, decimating a radius of up to 1,000 feet and causing the mountain to start crumbling. Angie, who had just started dashing downwards across the surface of the mountain, was affected by the immense vibration. As the part of the mountain she was running down blasted open, and she found herself falling through the air along with other pieces of rocks. Gustav, at this point, was already several hundred feet in front, gliding through the air in a free-fall pose. He was way ahead at the moment. "I told you a race wasn't only about speed," Gustav said internally while turning to the side to stare at Angie, who was currently far behind. As Angie fell through the air in a spiraling motion, she curled her body up to stabilize herself in midair before reaching out towards the massive piece of rock falling by the side. Angie's body moved towards it, and the instant both her legs made contact, she pushed herself forward with it. Tush! Her body traveled towards another falling piece of rock several feet away, and she proceeded to perform the same action as earlier. Tush! Thwoosh! Angie's body traveled in a zigzag motion downwards as she dashed from one falling piece of rock to another. As she arrived before the last one, she leaped in the direction of the mountain wall. The instant she got her footing, she ran down the mountain wall. Swoosh! Only about 100 feet was left, so she easily arrived at the bottom and dashed forward instantly to chase after Gustav that had gone far ahead. Bang! A massive chunk of rock fell on the exact same spot she landed a moment ago. Luckily, she was already several hundred feet in front already. Cheater, Angie said internally as she spotted Gustav's frame more than 1,000 feet ahead, but she wasn't mad after recalling his statement before the race. At this point, they were already starting to close in on the location where their race began. The race would soon be over, and Gustav was way ahead. Looks like it's time to get serious. The instant this thought appeared in Angie's mind, a third horn began to protrude from her forehead. At the same time, she was activating this, Gustav was also activating combination. Sprint plus dash, his speed almost doubled the instant he joined these two, allowing him to cross a distance of over 1,000 feet in a single second. Thwoosh! Angie seemed to have noticed the increase in speed, but the instant, the third horn grew out completely. Thwoosh! She broke the speed barrier, causing a loud blast to be sent forth from her position. Her figure traveled over 2,000 feet forward in an instant as whitish waves of energy began to gather around her. The ground ripped open as she moved forward, forming a line due to the immense force of energy gathering around her. Angie's silver hair floated upwards at this point as she closed in on Gustav. Gustav could already see the outline of the tree they started from in the distance, but the instant he smiled, he sensed a powerful force coming from behind. Even in his extremely fast state, Angie's speed was similar to a blur as she dashed past him the instant he turned to look at the side. Angie arrived in front of the tree just when Gustav was a few feet away and thrust her hand forward. Bang! The tree was instantly blasted apart as a massive gust of wind spread across the surroundings. SSHHHSSSHH! Gustav paused, his steps sliding forward a bit and arriving beside Angie. There were loud screams in the background as the wind spread across the place, causing the cadets in the vicinity to be on guard due to the fact that they were nearly swept away by the combined force from Angie and Gustav. Those who had witnessed both of them arrive here were extremely astonished as they never expected that there were cadets that could move at such speed, and they were first years. I won, Angie said with a smile as her third horn began to withdraw back into her forehead. Chapter 5:15. Yeah, Gustav responded with a surprised expression. That's quite the speed, Gustav said internally. You cheated and still lost, Angie said with an obvious tone of ridicule. Don't rub it in. I let you win this time, Gustav responded while folding his arms. Shameless, Angie voiced out before bursting out in laughter. You just destroyed another tree and you're laughing, now who's shameless? Gustav stated with a tone of ridicule as well. Oh snap! Angie turned to look around and truly just noticed this. Everyone in the vicinity was staring in their direction. Even some officers had arrived on the scene to see what the whole commotion was about. A wry smile appeared on Angie's face as she slowly and awkwardly pulled Gustav away from this location along with her. They both arrived somewhere a little more secluded than the earlier spot and leaned on another tree again. I hope you want to destroy this one too, Gustav stated while turning to the side to stare at Angie. You! Angie couldn't find the words to refute as a pout appeared on her face. Gustav just smiled at her expression and turned his face to stare up at the full moon in the sky. Close your eyes for a minute, and no matter what happens, do not open them, Angie suddenly voiced out. Huh! Gustav exclaimed with a confused expression. I won't remember. You can't refuse this demand, Angie reminded Gustav. Oh yeah? Dumb way of using it though. Gustav scoffed after seeing that this was what Angie wanted him to do. Just do it, Angie stated with a slightly flustered expression. Sure, just 1 minute. Easy, I'll start counting down, Gustav said before proceeding to close his eyes just as demanded. His arms were still folded as he leaned his back against the tree. Even though his vision was dark, through his perception, he could sense everything moving in the vicinity. He noticed Angie moving about the place, fidgeting. What's wrong with her? Gustav wondered as he continued counting down. Just when 20 seconds passed, Angie finally moved to Gustav's front and stood directly in front of him. She pulled his folded arms downwards and closed the gap between them further. Gustav placed his arms by the side and didn't revolt, or anything, since her demand was for him to remain like that. But at this point, Angie's chest was pressed to his, and their faces were only 2 inches apart. Gustav was starting to get restless at this point, and only about 30 seconds were left. Angie suddenly dislodged from him again and moved several feet away with a flustered expression. Gustav was once again confused, but he kept counting down. 15 seconds left. Gustav voiced out as a reminder, ready to get out of the awkward situation. Just when only 10 seconds were left, Gustav was about to voice it again when Angie suddenly moved towards him again. Wowish! Before Gustav could speak, he suddenly felt his mouth enveloped by a soft and warm pair of lips. Soft lips connecting sounds could be heard in the vicinity, as Angie merged lips with Gustav and wrapped her hands around his face. Gustav's eyes subconsciously opened for a few seconds at this point, as he felt Angie's mesmerizing lips on his. He stared at her cute face as her eyes remained closed while she sucked on his lips passionately. He closed his eyes back as he also started to savor Angie's sweet lips, interchanging from top to bottom lips while placing his hand on her waist and mashing her body against his tighter. Angie's breathing became hurried as she melted into Gustav's embrace, feeling her mind turn numb for the next few seconds before Gustav suddenly pulled his lips from hers. 1 minute. Time up, he muttered with a slightly distressed expression. Angie's face was extremely flushed at the moment. She quickly dislodged from him and moved back while turning her eyes away. She couldn't even make eye contact with Gustav currently and still wondered how she was able to go through with what had just happened. Bye, swish. Angie suddenly turned around and dashed away with immense speed. Gustav, who was about to speak earlier, brought his hand down after seeing her run. His face was also a tinge of red. He had never done that before, but natural instinct overtook him earlier, making him perform better than he thought he would win his first time. There goes my first time, Gustav muttered as he prepared to leave the area. You're still a virgin, though. The system suddenly butted in with a tone of ridicule. Gustav, don't call it your first time when you've not even managed to go beyond a kiss. Fuck you, Gustav responded internally before dashing off as well. Just like that, the night went by. For some, it was a nice night. For others, it was mostly a sleepless one. Angie happened to fall into the category that couldn't sleep. The scene with her and Gustav last night kept replaying in her head all night, and now she realized she shouldn't have run off like that. Gustav will be leaving this morning, so she won't be seeing him for some time. She could only hope for his safety and continue to train here. Gustav was also awake all through the night, preparing himself for the next morning. After packing everything he felt he would be needed for the mission, he took his bath and donned his black uniform. The black MBO uniform was the official outfit of every lower-ranked officer within the MBO. The white uniform he had been wearing day in and out within camp was the cadet outfit. No one within the camp was given this black outfit except for Gustav, since he was the only real officer in their midst. He grabbed hold of the MBO square-shaped officer badge and placed it in his storage device before moving out of his residence. Chapter 516. Currently, it was close to 6 am, so Gustav had to find his way to the main hall quickly. Once he moved out of the dragon residence, he spotted a silhouette in the distance. A 57-tall female cadet, sporting a gem-like azure-colored hair with pigtails on both sides of her head. A top-notch beauty and an extremely intense gaze that felt like it could pierce through steel. Elevra, what are you doing here? Gustav voiced out as they walked towards each other. You didn't think you'd just leave without saying goodbye, did you? Elevra voiced out before donning a calm smile. I won't be gone for long anyways, Gustav responded as they arrived in front of each other. Good. I'll be sure to take the first spot once again before you get back. Elevra said while moving forward further, standing side by side with Gustav. Don't keep me waiting for too long, Elevra added before she resumed walking forward, passing Gustav completely. Smirk. Sure I won't. Hopefully you won't be too weak for me by the time I get back. Gustav responded with a smirk, as he also resumed walking forward. Swoosh. Gustav dashed forward a few moments later, headed in the direction of the main hall. In a few minutes he arrived there and moved in. He was cleared for exit from campgrounds in no time, and Gustav was told to move towards the third massive mirror in the middle of the massive hall. The middle mirror displayed the forest they had arrived in on their first day here. In contrast, the third one displayed a location that seemed to be in front of a massive body of water. Gustav did as he was instructed and moved towards the third mirror. Voyez, his body completely phased through the mirror as he kept walking after arriving before it. Gustav found himself on the other side of the mirror and noticed he was standing in the middle of a massive platform situated in the middle of the ocean. On closer look, this wasn't a platform. Rather, it was a massive ship gliding through the oceanic waters. Officer Crimson! Someone called out to him from up ahead. It was another officer dressed in a different type of MBO uniform. I'm Officer Crone, your pilot, he said while reaching out to shake Gustav. Gustav shook his hand back. Follow me, he said while guiding Gustav across the massive ship. Multiple officers could be seen moving around, and with the size of the ship, Gustav couldn't see the end from his position without using God eyes. He followed the officer towards a particular part of the ship where different aircraft were parked. They moved towards a particular silver and blue-colored one amid the advanced-looking aircraft. She and the aircraft doors instantly glided open as they approached. Please come in, he said politely while moving in with Gustav following behind. The aircraft was half the size of an old-age plane but bigger than a jet. However, it looked super luxurious on the inside. Unlike the last time when Gustav traveled with an MBO aircraft, he would be all alone in the cabin this time. He quickly moved in and strapped himself in as the pilot started the engine. Zoom! The aircraft lifted off into the air and zoomed off into the distance. It was from above that Gustav could see the outline of the massive ship. It didn't really look like a ship. It seemed more like an exalted platform similar to an island floating above the ocean's surface level. It was square-shaped and very large. The number of officers moving across it was in the hundreds. I wonder what the purpose of this platform is? This was Gustav's final thought before it turned into a tiny dot and became out of sight in the next moment. While the aircraft was in motion, Gustav decided to bring out the information device and read about the city where they were headed. He had already done this before, but since there was nothing to do at the moment, he decided to preoccupy himself with that. The city was literally located on the other side of the world from their current position, according to what Gustav had noticed on the map displayed within the pilot's area. According to the map, the city had harsh dry weather, and sometimes ash fell from the sky. It would have been worse, but in an age of technology, controlling the weather was an easy feat with the right equipment, which was why it was still possible for people to live there. Civil wars still happen. Gustav was still surprised that the city was undergoing a civil war because, based on what he knew of history, civil wars were a thing of the past. They mostly occurred in old-time periods. He had never heard of one happening during his lifetime or in the past 500 years. Although he still knew that several intense battles still occurred in places across the world due to terrorist organizations, syndicates, and all that. Based on the reports, Lineage City plunged into a civil war due to several powerful groups coming into a disagreement on how much influence the world government was supposed to have on the city. Lineage City, just like many other cities, signed treaties with the world government. Still, they had continued to remain traditional in the sharing of power within the several powerful groups that were in existence since the beginning, only giving the world government a small portion of authority. This portion of power slowly expanded, and some of those groups noticed their authority and influence in the city reduced over the years. The affected ones wanted to retain their control of the city and voiced out their disagreement with the world government's power expansion, while the others who seemed unaffected didn't care and chose to side with the world government. The tension continued to escalate as these groups started to show hostile behaviors until the whole situation blew up to this extent. The city's citizens also got involved due to the degrading situation of the city's economic state, causing a full-blown civil war of people choosing sides. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.